The blue-skinned infant in the cracked stasis pod wasn't breathing right, and Darren Webb had exactly 4 to 7 hours and 13 minutes to prevent total organ failure. The pod's diagnostic display blinked its warning in an alien script he couldn't read, but the declining vital signs needed no translation. Wind howled outside his Montana cabin, driving sheets of snow against the windows. The blizzard had intensified since he dragged the wreckage of the small spacecraft into his workshop 20 minutes ago. The scattered debris trail stretched nearly half a mile through his property, steam rising where hot metal met snow. Darren's combat medic training kicked in as he assessed the situation. The infant's breathing apparatus nodes distinctive features on its face that marked it as a benzite weren't processing Earth's atmosphere correctly. The child's skin had taken on a darker, almost purple tinge that he suspected wasn't normal. The stasis pod's life support system was completely dead, likely from impact damage. He pulled out his old field medical kit, mind racing through options. The data crystals he'd recovered from the pod told a heartbreaking story. Scientist parents fleeing persecution, a desperate plan to save their child while they led pursuers away. They'd aimed the escape pod at the nearest habitable world Earth, hoping someone would find their baby before it was too late. That someone was now Darren Webb, and he refused to let another life slip away. He'd already lost Sarah to cancer 2 years ago. The empty ranch house held too many memories of their plans to start a family. The infant stirred weakly as Darren examined the pod's synthesizer patterns. The machine that would have created proper benzite nutrition was destroyed, scattered somewhere in the snow. Without it, the child would starve even if he solved the breathing problem. Working quickly, Darren salvaged parts from his ranch equipment and medical supplies. His fingers, still steady from years of treating combat wounds, assembled a crude breathing apparatus. He'd maintained enough equipment on the ranch to know how to jerry-rig solutions, but this was different. This was keeping an alien child alive. Time ticked away as he calibrated the device, checking and rechecking his work. The nearest town was hours away, impossible to reach in the storm. Everything depended on his skills, his supplies, and his determination to save this unexpected arrival who needed him. The infant's eyes opened, startlingly intelligent eyes that locked onto his face. Darren touched the pod's clear cover gently. "Don't worry, little one," he whispered. "I've got you." Now he just had to figure out how to synthesize alien baby formula before starvation complicated the atmospheric poisoning already threatening the child's life. Darren assessed the pod's environmental readouts one last time before stepping back. The synthesizer patterns held the key, but he needed a controlled environment first. His eyes drifted to the greenhouse visible through the workshop window, its metal frame barely visible through the swirling snow. "That's it," he muttered, grabbing his toolbox. The greenhouse, originally built for winter vegetables after Sarah's passing, could serve a far more crucial purpose. Working systematically, Darren sealed off the greenhouse with industrial plastic sheeting and duct tape. Each seam required triple-checking. One leak could prove fatal. The temperature control system hummed steadily as he integrated his old military-grade atmospheric processor, salvaged from his deployments overseas. The processor's digital display flickered to life as he input parameters from the pod's data. Green lights cascaded across the control panel, indicating proper filtration initialization. Moving quickly, Darren transferred the pod into the makeshift chamber. His kitchen became an improvised laboratory. The cattle mineral supplements lined up on the counter as he matched molecular compounds against the pod's nutritional data. Each combination went through his field analyzer, the results slowly approaching the target profile. "Third time's the charm," he said, measuring precise amounts of electrolytes and protein powder. The analyzer beeped 89% match to the required nutrient profile. It would have to do. The infant's color improved slightly after the first feeding, but her breathing remained labored. Darren set up his cot beside the pod, catching sleep in brief intervals between monitoring sessions. During one early morning check, a previously overlooked data crystal caught his eye, wedged in a corner of the pod's control panel. The crystal's contents made his heart sink. Neodymium, the missing piece. Without it, the baby's body couldn't process oxygen properly. Darren's mind raced to the barn, where boxes of old mining equipment gathered dust. The prospecting map spread across his workbench revealed a promising site, an abandoned mine shaft 3 miles north. Outside, the wind howled with increasing ferocity, rattling the greenhouse panels. The baby stirred in her pod, skin taking on a darker purple hue. Darren's monitoring system blared suddenly, its crude assembly of medical sensors indicating rapidly dropping oxygen levels. What he'd estimated as a day or two of leeway had just shrunk to mere hours. The mining maps trembled in his hands as he plotted the shortest route. 3 miles through whiteout conditions, with temperature dropping by the minute. His military training screamed against it. Every winter survival course highlighted the lethal foolishness of traveling in such weather. The infant's eyes opened, finding his face just as they had in that first moment. In the greenhouse's artificial light, they seemed to glow with an intelligence that transcended her few days of life. Darren checked his emergency gear one last time. The old mining kit contained everything needed to identify and extract neodymium samples. His cold-weather survival pack waited by the door, ready for immediate deployment. The baby's monitoring system showed another drop in oxygen saturation. He sealed his Arctic weather gear, checking each fastener twice. The portable oxygen analyzer went into his breast pocket, along with samples from the pod showing the exact mineral composition needed. 3 miles out, 3 miles back. The math was simple. The execution would be anything but. The greenhouse door sealed behind him with a soft hiss, maintaining the artificial atmosphere within. Darren activated his GPS unit, confirmed his heading, and stepped into the howling white void. The mine shaft waited somewhere ahead, hidden in the storm's fury, holding either salvation or failure in its depths. Darren moved with practiced efficiency, years of military precision guiding his hands as he assembled his gear. The infant Elva's vital signs continued their steady decline on his monitoring system. He'd found her name in the data crystal fragments, along with the desperate messages from her parents. Now that name drove him as he loaded his truck with climbing equipment, testing kits, and the thermal survival gear he'd kept from his service days. His boots crunched through fresh snow as he made one final check of the greenhouse. The backup generator hummed steadily as he connected it to Elva's life support systems. His satellite phone chirped as he synced it to the crude but effective alarm system he'd rigged. Any critical failure would alert him instantly. The truck's engine roared to life, but visibility dropped to near zero 50 yards from the ranch house. Snow pelted the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. The truck's treads fought for purchase as he crawled forward at walking speed, GPS coordinates of the mine shaft glowing on his dash display. An hour into the journey, the truck lurched sideways. The wheels spun uselessly in waist-deep snow. Darren grabbed his pack and essential mining gear, no choice but to continue on foot. The cold hit him like a physical blow as he stepped out. Even through his military-grade Arctic gear, the 20 degrees F wind cut deep. His sat phone buzzed. Elva's blood oxygen had dropped another 2%. Darren adjusted his pack and pushed forward, each step a battle against the wind. The mine entrance emerged from the white void after another grueling hour, a dark mouth in a snow-covered hillside. His headlamp revealed the collapsed main shaft. Darren accessed the secondary tunnel, testing each beam and support with experienced eyes. Ranch maintenance had taught him the warning signs of structural failure. A support beam groaned overhead as he advanced deeper into the earth. The mineral testing kit's display flickered green, strong neodymium readings ahead. Darren's sat phone vibrated again. Elva's oxygen levels. 15% below critical threshold. Time had run out for careful progress. A partially collapsed section blocked access to the mineral vein. Darren set microcharges from his mining kit, carefully placing each one to create a small breach while minimizing structural damage. The controlled detonation echoed through the tunnel. Rocks shifted ominously as he scrambled through the opening. His testing kit confirmed it high-grade neodymium ore. Darren filled his pack with samples, but the tunnel's stability was failing. Support beams cracked overhead. He scrambled backwards as sections of ceiling began to give way. A falling rock clipped his shoulder as he ducked under a failing support beam. The mine entrance glowed faintly ahead. Darren emerged into the storm, precious ore weighing down his pack. The whiteout conditions had intensified. His sat phone's GPS screen flickered uselessly, the storm interfering with satellite signals. Darren pulled out his old compass, orienting himself using the terrain features he'd mentally mapped during his approach. Cold seeped through his gear as he fought his way back toward the truck. His fingers had gone numb despite the thermal gloves. The weight of the ore samples doubled the effort needed for each step. Another alert from his phone, Elva's vital signs continuing their downward trend. The truck emerged from the white void like a snow-covered mountain. Darren dug out the winch cable with rapidly stiffening hands, secured it to a nearby tree, and engaged the mechanism. The truck inched forward as tire chains bit into packed snow. Finally behind the wheel, Darren cranked the heater to full power. His core temperature had dropped dangerously low during the excavation work. The truck fishtailed as he pushed it to its limits on the return journey. The sat phone's display showed Elva's life support systems straining under the continued load. The greenhouse lights pierced the darkness ahead as Darren's truck skidded to a stop. He grabbed the ore samples and his processing equipment, but his cold-numbed fingers fumbled with the greenhouse door handle. Inside, warning lights flashed across his environmental control panel. The artificial atmosphere was beginning to destabilize. Darren laid out his processing equipment with trembling hands. The neodymium ore held Elva's survival, but extracting and purifying it would push his improvisated setup to its limits. In her stasis pod, Elva's skin had darkened to a dangerous shade of purple. The race against time had entered its final phase. The life support system's warning klaxon jolted Darren into action. He rushed to process the ore, converting his workshop table into a makeshift mineral processing station. The old rock crusher from his barn whined as he fed chunks of neodymium-rich stone through its steel jaws. His sat phone buzzed again. Elva's oxygen saturation had dropped another percentage point. The fine powder from the crusher collected in steel trays as Darren prepared the chemical separation bath. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from CBRN training taking over as he measured precise amounts of extractants. "Hold on, little one," he muttered, checking the greenhouse monitors. The readouts painted a grim picture, environmental controls operating well beyond safety margins. The backup generator's fuel gauge hovered near empty. A harsh beeping drew his attention to the breathing apparatus. Angry red marks had formed where the tubes contacted Elva's skin. Through the transparent housing, he could see the telltale signs of infection beginning to spread. Darren's medical kit yielded a polymer coating designed for field-expedient wound care. He carefully applied it to the breathing tubes, checking each connection point. The infant stirred restlessly, her normally blue-tinted skin now a deep, dangerous purple. The rock crusher's whine died suddenly as the power flickered. Warning lights flashed across the greenhouse control panel, primary heating failing. Temperature readings began to drop. Darren diverted power from the ore processing equipment to the environmental controls, watching precious minutes tick away on his chronometer. He retrieved emergency heaters from his truck, positioning them around Elva's pod. The portable unit's fuel gauges showed 4 hours of operation at most. The blizzard howled outside, rattling the greenhouse panels with renewed fury. Cold sweat beaded on Darren's forehead despite the dropping temperature. His fingers trembled as he measured the final chemical separation. The resulting neodymium solution glowed faintly in its container high purity, but now came the real challenge. Working quickly, Darren modified his field nebulizer. The delicate calibration required absolute precision. Too concentrated and the neodymium could prove toxic. Too dilute and it wouldn't save her. He cross-referenced the pod's biological data 3 times before programming the delivery rate. The air filtration system groaned ominously. Darren glanced at the readout's primary filter approaching end of life, backup systems already engaged. He connected the nebulizer to Elva's breathing apparatus, carefully monitoring the spray pattern of the aerosolized solution. His sat phone chirped an incoming signal. Darren ignored it, focused on adjusting the nebulizer flow. The device beeped again, more insistently. Through exhaustion-blurred vision, he noticed an encrypted transmission indicator flashing on the screen. The greenhouse temperature stabilized, but multiple systems now showed critical warnings. Darren moved between control panels, adjusting power distribution, checking Elva's vitals, monitoring the neodymium delivery. His own hands had gone numb, his core temperature still dangerously low from the mining expedition. The breathing apparatus beeped first signs of improved oxygen absorption. Darren checked the medical readings. Infection response declining, respiratory rate beginning to stabilize. The neodymium solution was working, but the failing life support systems threatened to undo everything. Outside, the storm intensified. Darren's weather alert system showed another front moving in, even stronger than the first. His sat phone continued receiving encrypted signals at regular intervals, each ping carrying unknown implications. The backup generator coughed, fuel running dangerously low. Darren checked the nebulizer levels 2 more hours of treatment needed, minimum. He'd have to find a way to keep everything running, keep Elva stable, while dealing with cascading system failures, and whatever those encrypted signals meant. Through the greenhouse panels, barely visible in the swirling snow, a faint light pulsed in the sky. The pulsing light caught Darren's attention as his satellite phone vibrated with another encrypted signal. The rhythmic flashes pierced through gaps in the swirling snow, creating an otherworldly strobe effect against the greenhouse panels. He accessed the phone's diagnostic screen, noting the unusual encryption pattern. The signal structure matched nothing in his military communications experience. His fingers flew across the environmental controls, redistributing power to critical systems as the generator's fuel gauge dipped lower. The nebulizer hissed steadily, delivering its vital payload. Elva's skin tone had improved from deep purple to a healthier blue, though angry red marks still surrounded her breathing apparatus. Darren applied another layer of polymer coating to the infection sites. His security tablet chirped motion detected at the property's perimeter. The camera feed showed 4 figures moving in tactical formation through the whiteout, their specialized snow vehicles barely visible behind them. Military-grade thermal camouflage couldn't completely mask their heat signatures from his sensors. Darren activated his contingency protocols. He transferred Elva to the mobile life support unit, checking each connection twice. The compact system hummed to life, its battery indicator showing full charge. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he cleared evidence of the mineral processing operation, securing samples and equipment in pre-prepared hiding spots. The data crystals from Elva's pod went into a waterproof case, then into his tactical vest. He shouldered his pack, confirmed the mobile unit's stability, and accessed the maintenance tunnel through a concealed hatch behind his workbench. The underground passage, originally designed for winter pipe maintenance, now served a more crucial purpose. Cold air rushed through the tunnel as he sealed the hatch. Darren moved quickly but carefully, one hand steadying the mobile unit, while the other traced the guide rope he'd installed along the wall. The team outside triggered another security sensor. They'd reached the greenhouse perimeter. The storm cellar's reinforced door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Darren's preparations had transformed the space into a fully equipped backup facility. Backup power systems hummed as he connected Elva's mobile unit to the independent life support array. The infant stirred slightly, her vital signs holding steady. His security feed showed Captain Foster's team discovering the crash site debris. Their handheld sensors swept methodically across the snow-covered ground. One of the operators pointed toward the greenhouse, gesturing at readings on his equipment. The satellite phone vibrated again. This signal was different, stronger, with a familiar encryption pattern. Darren pulled out the data crystal case, comparing the signal's structure to the alien pod's communication protocols. The match was exact. He traced the signal's origin to high Earth orbit as his tactical training kicked in, analyzing potential scenarios. Foster's team split into standard breach formation around the greenhouse. Their movements triggered Darren's perimeter alerts in precise sequence, professional, methodical advancement that confirmed his suspicions about their capabilities and intent. The storm cellar's monitoring system tracked multiple signals now: Foster's team, the approaching orbital contact, and a high-bandwidth transmission from what could only be a command center. Colonel Hayes's involvement added layers of complexity to an already volatile situation. Elva's vital signs remained stable, but the infection around her breathing apparatus had spread despite the polymer coating. Darren prepared another antibiotic treatment as his security feeds showed Foster's team stacking up outside the greenhouse door. The orbital signal intensified. Through the cellar's reinforced viewport, Darren spotted new lights piercing the storm cloud's powerful, focused beams sweeping methodically across his property. The approaching presence above added urgency to an already critical situation. Foster's voice crackled through the storm, amplified by tactical gear. "This is a military operation. The premises are now under federal control. Occupants must identify themselves immediately." Darren checked his preparations one final time. The mobile unit's batteries showed full charge. Emergency supplies stood ready. Multiple escape routes remained viable. He activated the cellar's electromagnetic shielding as the lights from above grew stronger and Foster's team began their breach. The greenhouse door burst open as the storm reached new levels of intensity. Snow and wind howled through the gap while inhuman lights probed through the clouds. Darren watched through his security feed as three separate forces converged on his position, each with their own agenda for the precious cargo under his protection. A blinding flash lit up the storm clouds, followed by a deep electromagnetic pulse that rippled across the property. Foster's tactical radio died mid-transmission. His team's equipment sparked and went dark, leaving them in eerie silence broken only by the howling wind. Through the cellar's thermal imaging display, Darren watched the military team's coordinated movements dissolve into confusion. Their hand signals revealed their intention to split up two operators moving toward the greenhouse, while Foster and his second headed for the barn. A new signature appeared on Darren's monitoring system's massive and descending rapidly through the cloud layer. The benzite vessel's stealth systems flickered erratically, damage evident in its irregular energy patterns. Its landing thrusters activated, carving melted channels through the snow behind his property. Steam billowed up in thick clouds, further obscuring visibility in the whiteout conditions. Darren activated his contingency protocols through the shielded backup systems. The barn doors opened automatically as his remote-controlled farm equipment rumbled to life. Tractors and utility vehicles moved along pre-programmed paths, their heat signatures creating a web of movement across his property. "Time to move," he whispered to Elva, checking her mobile life support unit's readouts one final time. The infant's vital signs held steady, though red inflammation still ringed her breathing apparatus. He secured her unit in the reinforced all-terrain vehicle hidden in the maintenance tunnel. Four new thermal signatures emerged from the Benzite vessel, their environmental suits radiating distinct patterns unlike anything in his military database. Their movements displayed practiced efficiency as they swept the area with advanced sensor equipment. The Benzite team's leader, distinguished by enhanced sensor arrays on their suit, directed the others toward the barn with precise gestures. Their scanning equipment had already detected traces of the neodymium treatment. Darren's security feeds showed Foster's team regrouping with backup gear from their vehicles. The captain's hand signals indicated a full property sweep pattern. They discovered the sophisticated life support systems in the greenhouse evidence that would bring even more military attention. The mobile unit's power gauge showed 4 hours of operation remaining. Darren plotted 3 possible escape routes through the tunnel network, factoring in the Benzite's superior scanning technology and the military team's likely search patterns. His tactical display lit up with new warnings. The Benzite vessel's energy signature revealed weapons damage along its hull, recent plasma scoring that matched no known Earth-based weapons. Someone else had engaged them in combat, recently enough that the damage hadn't been repaired. Steam continued billowing from the ship's landing zone as Darren initiated the ATV's startup sequence. The tunnel's reinforced walls would shield them from detection, but only for a short time. Both teams were converging on his position, and the mobile unit's power supply demanded immediate action. The Benzite team's leader activated some form of enhanced scanning mode, their suit's sensor arrays pulsing with increasing intensity. They detected something likely Elva's unique biological signature. The 4 aliens moved with new purpose toward the barn's position. Foster's team had retrieved EM-fardened radios from their vehicles. Their transmissions, though partially masked by the storm, revealed they'd called for heavy reinforcements. The approaching backup team would arrive with equipment capable of detecting Darren's underground facilities. Water dripped from the tunnel ceiling as the Benzite ship's heat continued melting through layers of snow and ice above. Darren checked the ATV's systems one final time, plotting his course through the tunnel network. Multiple routes remained viable, but each carried its own risks. The Benzite's advanced sensors could penetrate standard concealment measures, while Foster's team knew military protocols and would expect counter-surveillance techniques. The mobile unit hummed steadily as Elva stirred in her protected enclosure. Above ground, 3 separate forces accelerated their search patterns. The storm's intensity increased, driving sheets of snow and steam across Darren's property, while inhuman lights probed through the darkness. A thunderous crack split the sky as a massive vessel broke through the cloud layer. The Benzite Military Command ship's hull gleamed with iridescent armor plating, its weapons systems tracking multiple targets below. Darren's tactical display identified the vessel's class and capabilities far superior to Commander Varick's damaged rescue ship. The military vessel's atmospheric processors activated, generating visible distortion waves that began dissipating the storm system. Snow patterns shifted unnaturally as the weather manipulation technology took effect. Darren watched his security feeds as visibility improved across his property, the protective cover of the blizzard dissolving. He engaged the ATV's adaptive camouflage, panels shifting to match the tunnel's concrete surfaces while thermal dampeners masked their heat signature. Elva's mobile unit registered steady vital signs as he navigated deeper into the maintenance passage. His property maps highlighted the junction ahead where the tunnel intersected with an abandoned railroad service line he discovered during well drilling operations. Ground team, establish containment perimeter. Admiral Sorvik's transmission cut through encrypted channels. Primary targets are the Infant and Commander Varric. Resistance members are secondary objectives. Drop pods impacted the snow with precise spacing. Benzite military forces deployed in practiced formations, their advanced armor systems gleaming under the command ship's spotlights. Lieutenant Commander Mavic directed his 20-soldier unit to encircle the property, their sensor sweeps penetrating standard concealment barriers. Captain Foster's voice crackled through upgraded communication gear. "Colonel, we have 3 distinct groups tracking the subject underground plus both Benzite factions. Request engagement parameters." "Secure that infant, Captain," Colonel Hayes replied. "Lethal force authorized. We cannot allow either alien faction to retain control of the asset." In the barn, Lieutenant Kira next analyzed Darren's medical equipment with increasing interest. Her handheld scanner cataloged his modified treatment protocols, comparing them against Benzite medical databases. The results triggered an urgent priority flag. "Commander," she transmitted to Varric's team, "the human stabilization methods show marked improvements over our standard procedures." His expertise could be essential for long-term treatment. The ATV's power gauge showed 35 minutes remaining as Darren reached the tunnel junction. The railroad passage extended in both directions, west toward his reinforced bunker with shielded medical equipment, east toward Lieutenant Nex's position, where Benzite medical resources waited. His tactical display also highlighted the option to circle back toward Foster's team through a maintenance loop. A high-pitched whine filled the air as Admiral Sorvik's ship charged its atmospheric excitation pulse. The weapon's energy signature ramped up on Darren's sensors, threatening to overload every electronic system in range. In the greenhouse, Foster's team watched the sophisticated life support equipment spark and fail. "Sir, the alien weapon is affecting all life support systems in the area," Foster reported. "If they deploy another pulse, the infant's mobile unit won't survive it," Colonel Hayes finished. "Change of plans, Captain. We need that asset alive for study. Locate and secure the subject before the aliens kill it with their own weapon." The ATV's diagnostic panel flashed a warning, 28 minutes of power remaining. Darren studied his tactical display as the Benzite military prepared another pulse. 3 paths lay before him, each with distinct advantages and critical risks. The bunker offered security but limited resources. The extraction team had medical capabilities but unknown intentions. Foster's team represented a calculated risk, banking on Hayes's scientific priorities. Above ground, Admiral Sorvik's ship positioned for another strike, unaware that his weapon threatened to terminate their primary objective. Lieutenant Commander Mavic's soldiers tightened their search pattern while Commander Varric's rescue team raced to reach Lieutenant Nex's position. The infant stirred in her protected chamber as multiple forces converged, her survival hanging on Darren's next decision. The tunnel junction security sensors tracked movement from all directions as Darren checked the mobile unit's connections one final time. His fingers hovered over the ATV's controls while the command ship's weapon charged for a second pulse, moments away from delivering a potentially lethal strike to every piece of life-sustaining equipment in range. Darren engaged the ATV's drive system, turning east toward Lieutenant Nex's position. The Benzite extraction team represented Elva's best chance against the impending atmospheric pulse. He activated his property's surveillance network through a shielded tablet, tracking the military patrol's movements through infrared signatures. The mobile unit's power indicator dropped to 25 minutes as he navigated the maintenance tunnel's tight corners. Condensation dripped from overhead pipes, creating sporadic puddles in his path. The ATV's treads gripped the concrete surface, maintaining stable transport for Elva's protected chamber. Through his surveillance feed, he observed Captain Foster's team establishing positions near the tunnel's eastern exit. Their tactical formations indicated standard containment protocols, but their movements lacked the aggression he'd expected. New priority directive. Colonel Hayes's voice crackled through their communications. The alien vessel's energy signature matches Project Starweather. Atmospheric destabilization weapon, designed for species-specific targeting. We need Carlson's expertise intact. Lieutenant Nex's scanner hummed as she analyzed the sophisticated modifications to Darren's medical equipment. The results triggered rapid calculations across her diagnostic display. Commander, his atmospheric adaptation protocols they're more advanced than our current systems. The shield harmonics could be modified. Her team immediately began reconfiguring their environmental suit's shield generators, integrating elements of Darren's designs. The hybrid technology created localized protective fields, visible as subtle distortions in the air around them. A series of flashes erupted across Darren's property as Major Thorvik's tactical team attempted synchronized teleportation drops. Their transport signatures collided with camouflaged mechanical barriers, simple steel and ceramic constructions that scattered their arrival coordinates. The Benzite soldiers materialized in random patterns, their formation disrupted. The ATV's sensors detected Lieutenant Nex's position 30 meters ahead. Darren checked Elva's vital signs one final time before proceeding. The infant's readings remained stable, though subtle variations suggested her system was responding to the ambient energy fluctuations. Above ground, Admiral Sorvik's ship initiated its primary weapon sequence. The atmospheric processor cores generated visible ripples through the air, distorting light patterns as energy built within the emitter arrays. Commander Varick's rescue vessel projected defensive shields, its power systems straining against the weapon's interference. "Your adaptations," Lieutenant Nex said as Darren emerged from the tunnel. "They account for atmospheric variables our systems ignored. We can stabilize the infant, but we'll need to integrate our technologies immediately." Darren transferred Elva's mobile unit to the Benzite medical station. Lieutenant Nex's fingers moved across holographic controls, merging their systems. The hybrid technology created new patterns in the diagnostic readings more efficient than either design alone. "Foster's team approaching from the west," Darren reported, checking his surveillance feed. "Thorvik's forces regrouping to the east." Lieutenant Nex adjusted the final calibrations. Integration complete. The infant's adaptation rate. These readings suggest unprecedented compatibility with the merged systems. Commander Varick's voice cut through their communications. "Lieutenant, prepare for emergency evacuation. We're detecting power fluctuations in Sorvik's weapon core. Impact imminent." Elva's vital signs displayed unexpected patterns. Her biological responses indicated not distress, but accelerated adaptation to the hybrid life support system. The merged human Benzite technology created environmental conditions that her physiology actively embraced. The rescue vessel's shields flickered as they extended to cover their position. Admiral Sorvik's weapon reached critical charge levels, its energy signature overwhelming standard sensors. Captain Foster's team advanced under cover, while Major Thorvik's scattered forces converged on their location. Lieutenant Nex analyzed Elva's latest readings. Her cellular adaptation rate exceeds all known parameters. The merged technology, she's not just surviving it, she's integrating with it at a molecular level. The atmospheric weapons charge sequence entered its final stage. Visible energy cascaded through the air above Darren's property. Commander Varick's rescue vessel held position, its shield straining against the building pressure while 3 separate forces closed in on their location. "Stabilization protocol activating," Lieutenant Nex announced, initiating the hybrid system's protective sequence. The merged technology hummed to life as the weapon's energy continued building overhead. The hybrid system's activation coincided with an unexpected shift in Elva's biometric data. Lieutenant Nex's fingers flew across the holographic controls, expanding the medical readouts. These readings, she adjusted the scanner's resolution. Her respiratory efficiency has increased by 40%. She's not just tolerating the merged technology, she's incorporating it. Darren leaned in, studying the cellular-level imagery. Elva's lung tissue displayed unprecedented adaptation, restructuring itself to process Earth's atmosphere through a combination of human and benzite methods. Above them, the rescue vessel's shields flickered with increasing strain. Commander Varick's voice cut through. Shield integrity at 60%. Sorvik's weapon is creating atmospheric interference beyond our projections. Visible energy rippled through the air as the military vessel's weapon reached 85% charge. Electronic systems across the property sparked and fluctuated. Through his surveillance feeds, Darren watched Major Thorvik's teleportation attempt scatter his forces across unexpected coordinates. The weapons affecting their transport signatures, Captain Foster reported, his team advancing through the electromagnetic distortion. EMP hardening is holding. We're establishing a defensive line around your position. Lieutenant Nex's scanner beeped urgently. The infant's adaptation rate is accelerating. Her cellular structure is stabilizing faster than our most optimistic models predicted. Darren connected his medical database to the benzite systems, transferring my treatment records now. The atmospheric processing modifications might help counter Sorvik's weapon. The ground shook as Commander Varick's ship executed an emergency maneuver, positioning itself between them and the military vessel. The rescue ship's hull groaned as it diverted power to reinforce its shields. Detecting breach attempts at the perimeter, Foster announced. Through the surveillance feed, Darren watched Thorvik's forces encounter his final defensive measure. Superheated steam erupted from modified geothermal vents, creating impenetrable natural barriers that their environmental suits struggled to navigate. "Sir," one of Foster's operators called out, "Colonel Hayes reports the weapon has a critical vulnerability. The infant's hybrid adaptation could destabilize its targeting matrix." Commander Varick's next transmission carried urgency. "Lieutenant, we're deploying the shield harmonizer, but we need a compatible power source." Darren activated his property schematics on a hardened tablet. "The greenhouse runs on geothermal power. We can modify the tap to interface with your technology." Steam continued billowing from the defensive vents as Thorvik's forces attempted systematic breaches. Captain Foster's team established overlapping fields of fire around the power junction, their hardened gear maintaining functionality despite the increasing electromagnetic interference. Lieutenant Nex's medical readouts displayed Elva's stabilizing vital signs. The infant's new hybrid respiratory system processed oxygen with unprecedented efficiency. "Her adaptation is complete," Nex announced. "The merged technology has created a sustainable biological interface." The military vessel's weapon reached final charging stage. Atmospheric distortion intensified, creating visible waves of energy that rippled across the sky. Commander Varick's rescue ship maintained its protective position, shields straining against the building pressure. Darren accessed the geothermal tap's control systems. Beginning power routing modifications, the harmonizer will need direct interface with the main junction. "Multiple contacts entering high orbit," Foster reported. "New energy signatures from both benzite factions. Their reinforcements are arriving." Lieutenant Nex integrated Darren's medical database into her systems, the hybrid technology expanding beyond Elva's life support to become a template for larger-scale atmospheric protection. The shield harmonizer hummed as they connected it to the modified power tap, creating localized stability in the increasingly chaotic atmosphere. Thorvik's forces pressed through gaps in the steam barrier, while Foster's team maintained defensive positions. Above them, new ships emerged from hyperspace, their arrival transforming the tactical situation into something far more complex. The atmospheric weapon's energy continued building, as Darren and Lieutenant Nex raced to complete the power modifications, knowing their next actions would determine not just Elva's survival, but the stability of Earth's atmosphere itself. The atmospheric weapon's charging sequence reached full capacity, radiating waves of electromagnetic energy that distorted the air like heat waves over summer asphalt. Darren's fingers flew across the geothermal tap's control interface, implementing the final power routing modifications. The shield harmonizer activated with a low-frequency hum, creating a dome of stable atmosphere that extended outward from their position. Power interface stable, Lieutenant Nex announced, her diagnostic display showing steady energy flow between the human and benzite systems, establishing containment field. The merged technologies generated a subtle ripple effect as the protective bubble expanded, pushing back against the weapon's atmospheric interference. Captain Foster's team took advantage of the stabilized zone, using Darren's agricultural equipment as fortified positions. Their EM-hardened weapons remained functional within the hybrid shield's protection. Colonel Hayes's voice cut through their communications. Data packet transmitted to Sorvik's vessel. Confirmatory scans show the weapon's effectiveness would be compromised by the infant's adaptation. Through his surveillance feed, Darren observed the military vessel's weapon emitters powering down. The atmospheric distortion decreased marginally as Admiral Sorvik's science team processed the new information. Major Thorvik's forces breached the steam barriers using crystalline heat dispersal technology, but their environmental suits began malfunctioning as they entered the merged energy field. Static crackled through their communications, while suit diagnostics flashed emergency warnings. Multiple ships entering high orbit, Commander Varric reported. Fleet Admiral Korvik's cruisers are establishing containment patterns. Captain Myra Varric's support vessel is approaching from Vector 37. Darren accessed his property's secondary systems. Activating barn facility power tap. Lieutenant, prepare for field expansion. The additional geothermal power surged through their integrated systems. Lieutenant Nex adjusted the harmonizer's output, extending their protective envelope to encompass Foster's defensive line. The agricultural equipment provided surprisingly effective cover harvesters and irrigation units repurposed into tactical positions. Elva's medical readings spiked unexpectedly. The infant's cellular structure displayed unprecedented changes, her tissue adapting beyond basic atmospheric compatibility. Lieutenant Nex enhanced her scanner's resolution, revealing accelerated molecular reconstruction throughout the child's respiratory system. Her adaptation rate exceeds all previous data, Nex reported, adjusting life support parameters to accommodate the changes. Cellular regeneration has increased by 300%. High-altitude movement caught Darren's attention on his surveillance feed. Dr. Sullivan's team descended using advanced stealth systems, their signatures barely registering against the atmospheric interference. They landed in synchronized patterns, avoiding both benzite factions as they approached the facility. "We're tracking new biological developments," Dr. Sullivan transmitted on a secured channel. "The infant's transformation appears to be self-directing." Above them, Fleet Admiral Korvik's cruisers initiated atmospheric entry procedures, their hull plating glowing from re-entry friction. Captain Myra Varric's smaller vessel executed evasive maneuvers, utilizing the planet's magnetic field to mask her approach vector. Major Thorvik regrouped his forces behind crystalline barriers, their malfunctioning suits forcing tactical adjustments. Captain Foster's team maintained overlapping fields of fire, using the expanded shield harmonizer's protection to full advantage. Elva's core temperature rising, Lieutenant Nex announced, her fingers moving rapidly across the medical controls, detecting cellular modifications in her cardiovascular system. The mobile life support unit's displays showed cascade effects throughout the infant's body. Her hybrid adaptation had evolved beyond simple atmospheric processing, actively restructuring her biology. The merged human benzite technology appeared to catalyze these changes rather than simply sustaining them. Dr. Sullivan's team reached the facility's outer perimeter, their specialized scanning equipment documenting Elva's transformation. The child's genetic expression has entered an accelerated state. These modifications are unlike anything in our database. Commander Varick's rescue vessel adjusted position as Fleet Admiral Korvik's cruisers descended through the upper atmosphere. Captain Myra Varick transmitted coded coordinates, indicating her medical team's readiness to assist. The shield harmonizer's energy field fluctuated as it processed the competing atmospheric influences. Darren monitored both geothermal taps, ensuring stable power flow to their integrated systems. The infant's readings continued evolving, suggesting her transformation would reach a critical stage within the hour. Major Thorvik's forces moved into assault positions, while Dr. Sullivan's team gathered preliminary data. Captain Foster's defensive line held firm, protected by the expanded shield envelope. Above them, three separate benzite factions converged on their position, each with their own agenda regarding the unprecedented biological adaptation occurring within their protective bubble. Lieutenant Nex adjusted the medical unit's monitoring systems, tracking the accelerating changes in Elva's physiology. The infant's vital signs remained stable despite the dramatic cellular reconstruction taking place throughout her body. The merged technology continued supporting her transformation, adapting its parameters to match her evolving needs. Lieutenant Nex's scanners lit up with cascading alerts as Elva's vital signs shifted into an unprecedented pattern. The infant's body emitted waves of electromagnetic energy that rippled through their monitoring equipment, creating interference patterns across every display. Energy signature detected, Nex announced, adjusting her instruments. The hybrid adaptation is generating localized electromagnetic fields. Through the surveillance feeds, Darren watched as Thorvik's targeting system sparked and wavered. The military-grade equipment faltered, their precise targeting reticles dissolving into static. Above them, Admiral Sorvik's atmospheric weapon emitters fluctuated erratically. "Their targeting systems are failing," Captain Foster reported, his team maintaining their defensive positions. The approaching benzite forces switched to manual targeting, their movements becoming notably less coordinated. Dr. Sullivan's team reached the outer edge of their protected zone, deploying specialized sensor arrays. "These readings are extraordinary," Sullivan transmitted. "The child's cells aren't just adapting to our atmosphere, they're incorporating Earth's native biological elements." The shield harmonizer's energy field pulsed in sync with Elva's electromagnetic emissions, its protective bubble expanding beyond their initial parameters. Commander Varick's voice came through with increased clarity. "The infant's signature is amplifying our shield strength by 30%. Fleet Admiral Korvik's cruisers descended through the cloud layer, their hulls gleaming in the afternoon sun. Ground teams deployed with containment units, but their equipment sparked and malfunctioned as they entered Elva's electromagnetic field. "Myra's approaching on Vector 6, Commander Varick announced as his sister's vessel broke through the orbital blockade. Plasma fire scarred its hull plating, but the ship maintained its course. The medical data from Captain Myra's team appeared on Lieutenant Nex's display. The hybrid respiratory system, it's processing both atmospheric compositions simultaneously, Nex reported, her fingers moving across the control interface. Efficiency ratings exceed all known parameters. Colonel Hayes accessed the tactical network. "All teams, adjust strategic priorities. The infant's adaptation represents a viable solution to atmospheric processing limitations. Darren integrated Dr. Sullivan's power sources into their systems. The shield harmonizer's energy field stabilized, creating a sustainable environmental bubble. Inside the protected zone, monitoring equipment detected subtle changes in the air composition. Atmospheric modification detected, Dr. Sullivan transmitted. The infant's adaptation is altering local air composition to support both species' requirements. Admiral Sorvik's vessels moved into containment formation, establishing an orbital grid that blocked all escape vectors. The atmospheric weapon powered up again, its targeting systems recalibrated to avoid Elva's position. High Command Priority Transmission, Commander Varric announced. They're demanding immediate acquisition of the infant. New sensor contacts appeared at the edge of their detection range. A fleet of sleek diplomatic vessels decelerated from faster-than-light travel, their designs distinctly different from military craft. Benzite's Central Council ships confirmed, Captain Foster reported. They're broadcasting diplomatic protocols. Inside the medical unit, Elva's vital signs stabilized at their new baseline. Her hybrid cells processed both atmospheric types with perfect efficiency, creating a sustainable biological interface between human and benzite physiology. Lieutenant Nex's scanner detected environmental changes expanding outward from their position. The air within their protected zone shifted its composition, becoming breathable for both species. Dr. Sullivan's team documented the transformation, their specialized equipment recording every detail of the unprecedented atmospheric adaptation. Through the facility's cameras, Darren watched as Thorvik's forces held their positions, their manual targeting systems proving inadequate for a precision assault. Captain Foster's team integrated Sullivan's specialized sensors into their defensive network, strengthening their tactical advantage. The diplomatic vessels entered high orbit, their presence forcing all military ships to maintain their current positions. Commander Varric and Captain Myra's ships adjusted their formation, preparing for multiple contingencies while respecting the Council's authority. Elva's monitoring systems displayed another shift in vital signs. The infant's adaptive processes continued evolving, her hybrid biology actively reshaping the environment around her. Lieutenant Nex's medical readouts showed stable progression as the transformation entered its next phase. Bright flashes illuminated the cloud layer as 3 benzite diplomatic vessels decelerated into Earth's orbit. Their sleek hulls bore the distinctive markings of the Central Council, their presence immediately altering the tactical situation. Incoming transmission from High Counselor Dren Marvik, Commander Varric announced, his display showing the Council flagship's credentials. All military vessels ordered to cease offensive operations. Admiral Sorvik's atmospheric weapon powered down, its energy signature fading from Darren's sensors. The military cruisers maintained their containment pattern, but their weapon ports sealed in compliance with Council authority. Dr. Sullivan's handheld scanner beeped rapidly. The modified atmosphere extends 300 yards in all directions, she reported, analyzing the data streams. Both oxygen and benzene gas ratios are stabilizing at viable levels. Through the facility's windows, Darren observed Major Thorvik's troops falling back to establish a defensive perimeter. Their crystalline barriers sparkled in the afternoon sun as Council shuttles descended, carrying scientific personnel in distinctive white environmental suits. Chief Researcher Dr. Karn Vodix requesting access to the adaptation zone, Colonel Hayes transmitted. Permission granted for limited cooperation with Council specialists. Lieutenant Nex adjusted her medical displays, tracking the expansion of the modified atmosphere. New microorganisms detected in the air samples. They're converting atmospheric elements at the molecular level. Commander Varick's rescue vessel detached from its position, maneuvering toward the Council flagship's docking port. His tactical feed showed the vessel's approach vector, careful to avoid the military blockade. Transmitting complete medical data package, Varick communicated. All innovations documented, including Darren's emergency adaptations to standard protocols. Inside the medical unit, Elva's vital signs displayed on wall-mounted screens. The infant's transformed cells continued seeding the environment, releasing specialized organisms that spread through the air. Dr. Sullivan's team deployed atmospheric sampling devices, capturing the microscopic agents for analysis. The bacterial strains show Earth-based characteristics, Dr. Sullivan noted, examining the readings. They're incorporating indigenous microbial elements into their structure. Construction vehicles descended from the Council vessels, their anti-gravity systems allowing precise placement within the adaptation zone. Temporary research facilities materialized as modular units locked together, creating an expanding scientific complex around Darren's property. Lieutenant Nex transmitted medical data to the new research center, documenting full procedural sequence. The hybrid protocols appear replicable under controlled conditions. Admiral Sorvik's flagship adjusted position as new energy signatures appeared at the system's edge. 3 resistance vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their hull configurations matching Commander Varick's resistance faction. Council diplomatic vessels launching to intercept, Captain Foster reported from his defensive position. First time they've directly intervened in military operations. Dr. Sullivan's scanner detected subtle changes in Elva's emission patterns. The adaptive capabilities they're transmissible, she announced, verifying the readings. Other Benzite infants could potentially develop similar modifications. Admiral Sorvik's cruiser initiated a series of encrypted transmissions, the coded signals reflecting off orbital satellites toward hidden coordinates. Lieutenant Nex's systems detected the communications but couldn't decrypt their contents. The research complex's primary laboratory activated its equipment, banks of specialized sensors focusing on Elva's transformed biology. Council scientists worked alongside Dr. Sullivan's team, their combined expertise directed toward understanding and replicating the atmospheric adaptation process. High Counselor Marvick's voice carried authority through the command channel. This facility is now under Council protection. All military forces will maintain current positions without further aggressive action. Darren watched through surveillance feeds as the adaptation zone continued expanding, its boundaries pushing steadily outward. Within its protected volume, humans and benzites moved freely without environmental assistance, breathing the same transformed atmosphere. The first successful integration of their species, biological requirements spread across his farmland, carrying the potential for changes that would reshape their worlds. A new energy signature pierced through the orbital sensor grid. Vice Admiral Jerk's Korvac's stealth cruiser Shadowblade materialized in low Earth orbit, its adaptive camouflage dissolving to reveal gleaming black hull plates studded with atmospheric manipulation arrays. Lieutenant Nex's displays registered an immediate spike in energy readings. Unknown vessel detected. Weapons signature matches Benzite military protocols, but with significant modifications. Dr. Sullivan's handheld scanner chirped urgently. Energy patterns consistent with enhanced atmospheric manipulation technology. The wavelength variants suggest targeted genetic disruption capabilities. Colonel Hayes activated Earth's orbital defense network. Satellite weapon platforms emerged from their concealed positions, their targeting systems locking onto the Shadowblade. The movement of Earth's defensive assets drew sharp reactions from several Benzite vessels. Atmospheric probes launching from enemy vessel, Captain Foster transmitted, tracking multiple projectiles on descent vectors. Security Director Bren Thavik's shuttle touched down outside the research facility. Armored troops in silvery environment suits deployed in practiced formations, integrating seamlessly with Foster's defensive positions. Their specialized equipment gleamed with a distinctive coating designed to resist adaptive influences. Council security forces in position, Thavik announced through the command channel, establishing joint defense protocols with Earth military units. Darren's fingers moved across the shield harmonizer's controls, implementing new frequency patterns based on Elva's latest biological data. The barrier shimmed with enhanced energy as Lieutenant Nex fed benzite shield frequencies into the system. Shield modifications complete, Nex reported. Barrier now resistant to military-grade signatures. 3 of Korvac's probes evaded the outer defenses, their nano-disruptor payloads active. Darren activated the emergency containment systems he had installed throughout the facility. Energy fields snapped into place, trapping the probes in specialized containment bubbles. Through the facility's windows, the transformed landscape displayed unprecedented changes. Modified plants grew at accelerated rates, their structures incorporating both terrestrial and benzite biological elements. Dr. Sullivan's sensors recorded the expanding ecosystem's vital signs. Plant life showing hybrid characteristics, Sullivan transmitted. Oxygen production increased by 40%, detecting benzene gas processing through modified cellular structures. Admiral Sorvik's flagship transmitted tactical data to Colonel Hayes's command center. The encrypted download revealed positions of concealed benzite military assets throughout the solar system. Multiple vessels broke formation, commanders declaring allegiance to either Korvac's hardline faction or the Council's diplomatic initiative. Captain Myra's vessel accelerated through the orbital grid, positioning itself between the Shadow Blade and Earth's atmosphere. Her ship's experimental shield technology activated, creating a barrier that replicated the properties of Elva's adaptive zone. Shield harmonics matched to adaptation frequencies, Myra transmitted, maintaining position to block weapons deployment. Vice Admiral Korvac's voice cut through all communication channels. This is your final warning. Surrender the hybrid infant or face immediate neutralization. High Counselor Marvik's response carried equal authority. Stand down, Vice Admiral. Your actions constitute a direct violation of Council authority. Inside the medical unit, Elva's monitoring systems displayed new patterns in her cellular structure. The infant's modified biology began affecting the molecular composition of nearby materials, her influence spreading through the transformed environment. Security Director Thavik coordinated with Captain Foster, establishing overlapping fields of fire. Human and benzite troops moved with practiced efficiency, their combined tactics creating an unprecedented defensive network around the facility. Ground forces detected, Foster reported. Enemy units carrying specialized weapons. Energy signatures suggest genetic suppression technology. Dr. Sullivan's team worked rapidly, collecting samples from the expanding ecosystem. Their specialized containment units preserved specimens of modified plant life and atmospheric particles for analysis. The research data accumulated as Korvac's forces approached the outer perimeter. The Shadow Blade's primary weapon charged, its enhanced atmospheric manipulation technology targeting the adaptive zone. Captain Myra's vessel maintained its blocking position, preventing Korvac from establishing a clear firing solution. Multiple hostile signatures approaching, Lieutenant Nex announced. Detecting active genetic suppression fields. Security Director Thavik's forces activated their adaptation-resistant armor, the protective fields creating a visible barrier against biological influence. The combined human-benzite defensive line prepared for contact as Korvac's ground forces advanced through the transformed landscape. Streaks of light pierced the atmosphere as stealth drop pods launched from the Shadowblade's ventral bays. Lieutenant Nex's sensors registered 30 distinct thermal signatures descending through carefully calculated trajectories. "Drop pods detected," she announced, tracking their descent paths. "Genetic suppression weapons active inside each unit." Commander Dax Thull's tactical feed appeared on the main display as his pod pierced the upper atmosphere. His elite squad spread out in a precise formation, their adaptation-resistant combat suits gleaming with a dull metallic sheen. "Doctor." Sullivan's instruments chirped with increasing frequency. "The modified vegetation is evolving rapidly," she reported, examining new data streams. "Oxygen production has tripled, and these structures they're developing specialized storage chambers." Through the facility windows, crystalline formations emerged from the transformed soil, their structures matching the molecular patterns of benzite atmospheric processors. The modified plants wove between these formations, creating an intricate network of biological machinery. Security Director Thavik worked at a central command station, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Integrating Earth defense protocols with benzite targeting systems," he transmitted. "Captain Foster, we need tactical overlay data." "Sending terrain analysis now," Foster responded. His team's ground-based sensors mapped every contour of the transformed landscape, highlighting optimal defensive positions. 3 distinct security rings materialized around the facility as human and benzite forces moved into predetermined positions. Colonel Hayes's voice cut through the tactical channel, orbital defense grid active, tracking stealth signatures through modified asteroid detection systems. Darren focused on the shield harmonizer's controls, Lieutenant Nex at his side. They extracted specific frequency patterns from Elva's biological data, weaving them into the barrier matrix. The shield rippled with new energy as the modification took hold. "Integration successful," Nex confirmed. "Shield now capable of energy conversion and redistribution." The first shots from Thull's forces struck the outer barrier. Instead of dissipating the energy, the modified shield absorbed it, channeling power into the facility's life support systems. Efficiency readings spiked as the attack actually strengthened their defenses. Admiral Sorvik's transmission reached the Council vessels. "Technical analysis complete. Genetic suppression weapons carry cascade risk. Effects could destroy entire modified ecosystem." "Doctor." Sullivan's scanner revealed new patterns in the soil composition. "The crystalline formations are expanding through the root systems," she observed. "They're replicating benzite atmospheric processing at a cellular level." Commander Thull's forces struck with precision. Phase-shift generators activated, allowing them to pass through the outer security ring. Their adaptation-resistant suits sparked with energy as they penetrated the transformed zone. "Breach detected in Sector 7, Captain Foster announced. Enemy forces using phase-shift technology." But as Thull's team advanced, their protective equipment began to fail. The hybrid atmosphere seeped through microscopic gaps, overwhelming their resistance systems. Several soldiers stumbled, their suits unable to compensate for the rapidly changing environment. Security Director Thavik seized the moment. "Launch counteroffensive," he ordered. "Deploy modified sensor drones." The drones activated, their enhanced detection systems tracking the phase-shift signatures. Thull's stealth advantage evaporated as his team's positions appeared on tactical displays throughout the defensive network. Captain Foster's soldiers moved through the transformed terrain with practiced ease, outflanking the struggling benzite forces. Their familiarity with the modified landscape allowed them to strike from unexpected angles, forcing Thull's team further back from the facility. High Counselor Marvik's expression tightened as he received new data from the benzite homeworld. The atmospheric processor readings scrolled across his display, showing critical failures spreading through their planetary systems. "This is High Counselor Marvik," he transmitted on all frequencies. Our planetary atmospheric processors are failing. The adaptation protocols developed here may be our only solution. Inside the medical unit, Elva's monitors displayed increasingly complex patterns. The infant's influence continued spreading through the transformed zone, creating a complete microenvironment that sustained both human and benzite life. Dr. Sullivan's team worked rapidly, documenting each new development as the terraforming system evolved. Commander Thull's forces regrouped at the edge of the modified zone, their adaptation-resistant suits showing signs of molecular breakdown. The transformed atmosphere had proven more potent than their protective technology could handle, forcing them to maintain distance or risk complete exposure to the hybrid environment. Through the command channel, High Counselor Marvick's voice carried new urgency. All Council representatives report to the flagship immediately. Colonel Hayes, Commander Varick, Admiral Sorvik, your presence is required for emergency consultation. The tactical displays shifted as Commander Thull's forces activated new equipment. Dark patches appeared in the transformed landscape as atmospheric scramblers hummed to life, creating expanding zones where the hybrid environment began to wither. Multiple dead zones detected, Dr. Sullivan announced, her scanner tracking the environmental degradation. Oxygen production dropping in affected areas. Both human and benzite biological signatures show severe disruption. Through the facility windows, previously vibrant sections of the modified ecosystem turned gray and lifeless. The crystalline formations throughout the soil pulsed with remaining energy, their structures fighting to maintain atmospheric balance. These crystal matrices, Dr. Sullivan transmitted, examining new data streams. They're not just growing, they're processing atmosphere more efficiently than any artificial system. The molecular conversion rate exceeds benzite technology by a factor of 3. Security Director Thavik studied the tactical overlay, noting how the transformed plant life responded to the atmospheric attack. Shift defensive positions, he ordered. Use the active vegetation as cover. The combined human benzite forces moved through the remaining healthy zones. Around them, modified plants released concentrated bursts of oxygen, creating visible ripples in the air that disrupted the scrambler's effect. Lieutenant Nex's fingers flew across her console, correlating new biological data. Sir, Elva's transformation is accelerating. Her cellular structure is producing specialized atmospheric conversion enzymes. Darren examined the readings, watching as the infant's influence spread through environmental systems. The enzymes dispersed through air and soil, strengthening the ecosystem's natural defenses against artificial manipulation. Above the facility, energy weapons flared as the shadow blade struck at Captain Myra's vessel. Her shield generators sparked and failed, but the attack revealed a critical flaw in the hostile ship's stealth systems. Target lock established, Colonel Hayes transmitted. Orbital platforms have clear shots at their weapon ports. They'll lose their cloak if they try to deploy the atmospheric disruptor. Admiral Sorvik's next transmission carried encrypted data packets. Security Director, implementing override protocols. These codes will disable their scrambler network. Thavik's command display showed immediate results as half the atmospheric disruption devices shut down. The adaptive ecosystem surged into the newly freed spaces, healing the environmental damage. Dr. Sullivan's scanner detected new growth patterns in the transformed zone. The modified plants are producing hybrid seed pods. Each contains genetic material from both species, their natural atmospheric processors. In orbit, the Shadow Blade maintained position, unable to risk exposing its main weapon. Vice Admiral Korvac received a coded transmission, his expression hardening as he accessed classified data about a hidden weapon platform near Mars. Through the command channel, Automated alerts tracked power signatures building in Mars orbit. The prototype platform began its activation sequence, its atmospheric elimination technology preparing to fire. Weather patterns shifted around the facility as Elva's influence reached critical mass. Storm clouds formed in new configurations, driven by the interaction between transformed atmosphere and standard Earth conditions. Dr. Sullivan's monitoring systems track the expanding weather effects. The adaptive zone is creating its own microclimate. These weather patterns show characteristics of both Earth and benzite atmospheric systems. The infant's monitoring equipment displayed increasing complexity in her biological processes. Each new enzyme production cycle strengthened the hybrid environment's resistance to artificial manipulation. Security Director Thavik coordinated with the defensive lines as the ecosystem continued its recovery. Natural barriers of enhanced vegetation protected key positions, their oxygen production maintaining survivable conditions despite the remaining scramblers' influence. A piercing alarm cut through the command center as Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected the power surge from Mars. Lieutenant Nex's display shifted to show a massive energy signature building within what appeared to be an abandoned mining facility on the red planet's surface. Project Eclipse detected, Colonel Hayes transmitted, his voice tight. Analyzing weapon capabilities now. Dr. Sullivan's eyes widened as the data streamed across her screen. This is a Planet Killer class installation. The atmospheric elimination technology matches known benzite military protocols. Below the facility, crystalline structures spread through the soil in fractal patterns. The formations pulsed with bioelectrical energy, creating a network of natural atmospheric processors that extended far beyond the original adaptive zone. Dr. Sullivan's scanners tracked their growth, mapping an exponential expansion of the crystal web. These formations are establishing independent processing nodes, she reported, examining the underground network. The system is self-replicating, creating its own atmospheric control grid. Security Director Thavik's fingers flew across his tactical console as he coordinated with Earth Space Command. Lunar interceptors launching now. Admiral Sorvik's shield modifications are integrated and operational. 3 sleek vessels lifted from lunar bases, their enhanced shields gleaming with benzite energy signatures. Commander Varick's resistance ships fell into formation alongside them, followed by the distinctive profile of Colonel Breck Tavik's intervention unit. The eastern perimeter erupted in weapons fire as Commander Thull launched his final assault. His remaining forces activated their atmospheric scramblers, attempting to create a dead zone through the facility's defenses. The modified ecosystem responded. Instantly transformed plants released clouds of specialized spores that neutralized the artificial manipulation attempts. Remarkable, Dr. Sullivan breathed, analyzing the defense mechanism. The environment has developed its own immune response. A bright flash lit the command center as Vice Admiral Korvac's form dissolved from the Shadowblade's bridge. The teleportation beam redirected his pattern to the Mars installation, leaving Subcommander Thornick in temporary command of the vessel. Darren activated his backup systems, bringing the geothermal network online. Power flowed through underground conduits, merging with the crystalline formations to create a sustainable grid. Lieutenant Nex monitored the energy distribution as it strengthened the adaptive zone's natural defenses. Geothermal tap network active, she confirmed. Power levels stable and increasing. High Counselor Marvik's hologram materialized in the center of the command station. The Council has officially condemned Vice Admiral Korvac's actions, he announced. Our atmospheric crisis leaves us no choice but to embrace this adaptation. We must preserve this technology at all costs. Captain Foster's team moved through the transformed landscape, securing key positions around the facility perimeter. The modified plants provided natural cover, their enhanced structures resistant to weapons fire. Behind them, Dr. Sullivan's researchers collected samples from the expanding ecosystem, preserving critical data about its development. In the medical unit, Elva's monitoring equipment registered new chemical processes within her modified biology. Complex organic compounds formed in her cellular structure, suggesting deliberate engineering rather than random mutation. These compounds, Dr. Sullivan transmitted from her lab, they're designed to accelerate adaptation in other organisms. The changes appear purposeful engineered to ensure survival of both species. The Joint Strike Force accelerated toward Mars as Project Eclipse's power signature continued to build. On the Shadowblade's bridge, Subcommander Thornick received increasingly urgent messages from his crew as the true nature of their mission became clear. Lieutenant Nex's scanners tracked the crystalline network's expansion, now reaching 2 miles beyond the facility in every direction. The formations created a living computer, processing atmospheric data and adjusting the ecosystem's responses in real time. Through the facility windows, the transformed zone pulsed with bioluminescent energy as the geothermal grid fully integrated with the natural processors. The ecosystem had become a self-sustaining entity, capable of defending itself against technological interference while supporting both human and benzite life. Through the command center's main display, Dr. Sullivan's analysis cast an ominous red glow across worried faces. Project Eclipse isn't just an atmospheric weapon, she explained, highlighting molecular simulations. It creates a cascade effect that prevents atmospheric reformation. Earth's air would dissipate into space, leaving the planet permanently uninhabitable. Colonel Hayes' fingers danced across multiple control interfaces. Activating full orbital grid, hundreds of defensive satellites shifted position, their weapons arrays orienting toward Mars. Earth interceptors form up on resistance vessels. Follow Security Director Thavik's attack pattern Delta 7. The crystalline formations beneath the facility pulsed with increasing intensity. Lieutenant Nex's monitoring station tracked their expansion through subterranean layers. Network growth rate accelerating, 5 square miles of coverage and expanding. Weather stations reporting anomalous patterns, Captain Foster transmitted. His team moved through the transformed zone, assisting Commander Thull's soldiers as their environmental suits deteriorated. Temperature and pressure stabilizing at optimal levels for both species. Inside the medical unit, Elva's latest test results sparked intense activity. Dr. Sullivan leaned close to her microscope, examining the infant's cellular samples. These protein structures their perfect atmospheric catalysts, natural biological processors. The Mars Strike Force emerged from FTL, their ships arranging into Thavik's prescribed formation. Earth interceptors spread wide, creating a protective screen for the benzite warships. Admiral Sorvik's tactical overlay highlighted Project Eclipse's thermal exhaust ports. Defensive drones detected, Colonel Breck Tavik announced. Multiple waves incoming. Vice Admiral Korvac stood at Project Eclipse's main control station, watching the targeting countdown. 13 minutes to atmospheric alignment. Deploy all remaining units. On the Shadowblade's bridge, Subcommander Thornick received another urgent message from his engineering crew. Sir, we've confirmed the weapon specifications. This technology could have saved our outer colonies. Security teams reporting widespread suit failures, Captain Foster transmitted. His medical officers treated Commander Thull's collapsed soldiers. The modified atmosphere is reconstructing their equipment at the molecular level. Dr. Sullivan's lab computers processed new data as Elva's proteins replicated in the test chamber. First synthesis successful. These compounds could revolutionize atmospheric processing technology. The crystalline network detected the underground aquifer, its sensors registering the water's mineral content and flow rate. Bioluminescent pulses spread through the lattice as it prepared to incorporate the new resource. High Counselor Marvick addressed the emergency council session, his hologram flickering with urgency. By ancient law and present necessity, I invoke Article 7 of the Atmospheric Preservation Act. The Central Council hereby assumes direct control of all military assets. Project Eclipse's defense drones engage the approaching strike force, their energy weapons creating a web of deadly fire. Earth interceptors executed precise evasive maneuvers, drawing fire away from the Benzite ships as they pressed toward the installation. Thermal targeting solution acquired, Colonel Hayes transmitted. Beginning attack run on exhaust ports. Through the facility windows, Dr. Sullivan watched the adaptive zone pulse with unprecedented activity. Regional weather patterns shifted visibly as the microclimate expanded its influence. The crystalline network prepared to merge with the approaching water table, its processing capabilities poised for exponential growth. Vice Admiral Korvac's fingers tightened on his control panel. 10 minutes to atmospheric alignment. Activate secondary defense grid. The battle for Earth's future accelerated toward its critical moment. Multiple forces converged on Mars as Project Eclipse's weapon platform continued its deadly countdown, while beneath Darren's facility, a new form of atmospheric adaptation prepared to transform their world forever. A brilliant flash erupted from Mars' surface as Project Eclipse's activation sequence triggered an unexpected electromagnetic cascade. Energy signatures rippled across the planet's magnetic field, creating distinct patterns that Earth's defense satellites instantly detected and analyzed. New targeting data acquired, Colonel Hayes announced, his display highlighting structural weaknesses throughout the installation. Admiral Sorvik confirming thermal regulation vulnerabilities in sectors 7 through 12. The Admiral's ship transmitted tactical updates to the strike force. Concentrate fire on the cooling systems. Their design shows critical flaws in heat distribution during atmospheric dissolution. Major James Wilson led the human interceptor wing toward the drone screen, their weapons arrays glowing with distinctive benzite energy signatures. Strike teams, Pattern Alpha, target those defense units with modified penetrator rounds. Commander Varick's vessels split off to flank the installation's power distribution nodes, while Colonel Tavik's council forces moved to blockade potential escape vectors. The coordinated assault forced Project Eclipse's automated defenses to divide their attention. On Earth, Lieutenant Nex's monitoring station lit up with urgent alerts. The crystalline formations beneath the facility surged with new energy as they contacted the underground aquifer. Bioluminescent pulses raced through the expanding network. Growth rate increased by factor of 10, she reported, tracking the rapid spread. New formations detected 5 miles from central position. Security Director Thavik activated facility-wide communications. Implement Protocol 7. All units establish containment perimeter at expansion boundaries. His teams deployed rapidly, setting up mobile monitoring stations to track the ecosystem's advance. Dr. Sullivan analyzed atmospheric readings from the affected zones. Air quality improving in all sectors. Plant growth accelerating without signs of mutation or degradation. Inside the facility's medical wing, Elva's vital signs fluctuated as her monitoring equipment registered new biological changes. Complex protein structures formed within her cells, their patterns matching the successful synthetic samples in Dr. Sullivan's lab. Captain Foster integrated Commander Thull's recovered soldiers into his defensive positions. Their exposure to the modified atmosphere has rendered Korvac's scrambler technology ineffective, he transmitted to command, incorporating their tactical data into our defense grid. Aboard the Shadowblade, alarms blared as the ship's environmental processors failed. Lieutenant Kara Vex seized control of life support systems, her crew securing key stations throughout the vessel. "Engineering confirms critical degradation," she announced over ship-wide channels. "We stand with the Council. Subcommander Thornick, surrender control or we vent your section." The Mars battle intensified as Major Wilson's interceptors broke through the drone screen. Sustained fire from Earth vessels created a gap in the defenses, allowing Commander Varick's ships to target the installation's power core. Inside Project Eclipse, Vice Admiral Korvac activated emergency protocols, initiating antimatter containment overload. "If I cannot cleanse Earth's atmosphere, I will ensure no one can use this orbit." Warning signals flashed across Colonel Hayes' tactical display. "Antimatter containment failing. Detonation will contaminate Mars' orbit and damage Earth's upper atmosphere." Long-range sensors detected additional signatures approaching the solar system. Dr. Sullivan's lab computers processed new data as her synthetic atmospheric compound demonstrated repair capabilities in damaged processor units. "The biological components are stabilizing mechanical systems," she reported, examining the hybrid results. "This could provide a transition path for both species." In the transformed zone, the crystalline network continued its exponential growth. New formations emerged from the soil, their structures more complex and efficient than the original processors. The adaptive ecosystem strengthened with each expansion, creating a sustainable environment that served both human and benzite needs. Elva's medical sensors registered another shift in her cellular structure. The infant's body pulsed with bioluminescent energy that matched the patterns spreading through the soil beneath the facility. Her adaptation process accelerated, suggesting capabilities beyond their current understanding. Above Mars, the Joint Strike Force pressed their attack as Project Eclipse's antimatter containment systems approached critical levels. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance while new threats approached from deep space. The approach of additional ships forced Colonel Tavik to make an immediate tactical decision. "Bravo Wing, maintain suppressing fire. Lieutenant Commander Voss, initiate emergency docking procedures." His vessels split formation, two continuing their assault while the third angled toward Project Eclipse's airlock. Major Wilson's interceptors adjusted course, forming a protective screen around Voss's ship, providing close support, vectoring to intercept incoming drones. Inside Project Eclipse's control center, warning klaxons intensified as antimatter containment readings spun into critical ranges. Vice Admiral Korvac activated the emergency teleportation system, his fingers racing across the controls. Energy surged through the platform circuits, but the antimatter interference disrupted the targeting scanners. The transport beam engulfed him in crackling light. Korvac materialized in darkness. His environmental suit's headlamp illuminated the cramped confines of a maintenance shaft. Status indicators on his wrist display showed declining oxygen levels. 28 minutes of air remained. The approaching benzite vessels transmitted their identification codes. Admiral Thex Corvan's voice cut through the tactical chatter. "This is 3rd Fleet Engineering Division. We have prototype containment field generators, requesting immediate coordination with Earth forces to prevent antimatter detonation." Commander Varick's tactical display updated with the new engineering data. "Colonel Hayes, we need precise synchronization between your defense satellites and the benzite containment fields." On Earth, Dr. Sullivan loaded the synthesized proteins into Darren's modified medical dispersal unit. The machine hummed as it processed the compound. "First batch ready for atmospheric deployment. Beginning mass production sequence." Security Director Thavik authorized the emergency data transmission, sending synthesis protocols to Benzite Homeworld now. Their environmental processors can begin modifications immediately. Lieutenant Nex's monitoring station tracked the crystalline network's interaction with the underground aquifer. Sir, water analysis shows rapid reduction in toxic compounds. The network is purifying contaminated groundwater. The Shadowblade's bridge crew worked quickly to implement Dr. Sullivan's modifications. Lieutenant Kara Vex supervised the installation of synthesized proteins into their atmospheric processors. Life support stabilizing. Engineering reports oxygen levels returning to normal. 3 benzite warships in nearby sectors transmitted urgent requests for the modification data. Their crews had witnessed the Shadowblade's successful conversion. Lieutenant Commander Voss's vessel approached Project Eclipse's outer hull, maneuvering thrusters firing in precise bursts. Beginning final docking sequence. Rescue teams standing by. Admiral Corvin coordinated with Earth's defense grid, initiating containment procedure. First energy pulse in 3 seconds. The prototype generators activated, creating overlapping fields around Project Eclipse's power core. Containment field strength at 30%, Commander Varric reported, adjusting pulse frequency to compensate for core instability. Inside the maintenance shaft, Korvac accessed an emergency terminal. The small screen displayed his location near the platform's outer hull. His suit's oxygen indicator ticked down to 24 minutes. The crystalline formations beneath Earth's facility continued their expansion. New structures emerged from the soil, their patterns more intricate than previous generations. Lieutenant Nex's sensors detected the network approaching the outskirts of 3 major population centers. Dr. Sullivan's production system filled another rack of protein synthesis chambers. Second batch complete. Beginning atmospheric dispersal tests. Lieutenant Commander Voss's ship locked onto Project Eclipse's airlock. Docking complete. Rescue teams moving to breach points Alpha through Delta. The antimatter containment fields fluctuated as Admiral Corvin's engineers implemented their third adjustment. Commander Varric monitored the energy readings. Core stability increasing to 4 to 5%. Beginning next synchronization sequence. Major Wilson's interceptors destroyed another wave of defense drones. Hull breach in Sector 7. Rescue teams have access to the maintenance level. The crystalline network's water purification effect spread through connected aquifer systems. Environmental monitoring stations across 3 continents reported decreasing pollution levels in groundwater supplies. Lieutenant Kara Vex received confirmation of successful atmospheric conversion from the first defecting benzite vessel. 2 more ships began implementing the modifications as their original processors approached failure. Rescue teams moved through Project Eclipse's corridors, their helmet displays tracking life signs and structural integrity. Lieutenant Commander Voss led the main group toward Korvac's position. The Vice Admiral's oxygen supply continued its steady decline as the antimatter containment field generators pulsed with increasing power. On Earth, Dr. Sullivan prepared the third batch of synthesized proteins, while Security Director Thavik coordinated with municipal authorities regarding the advancing crystalline network. The adaptive ecosystem's sophisticated new formations continued their inexorable growth, reshaping the environment with each passing minute. The adaptive ecosystem's sophisticated formations reached the edge of Seattle's industrial district as Admiral Corvin's containment fields stabilized around Project Eclipse. Energy readouts climbed steadily on Commander Varric's display. Containment at 60%, he transmitted. Field harmonics matching core resonance. The antimatter's violent purple glow dimmed as the overlapping fields took effect. Lieutenant Commander Voss's rescue team advanced through Project Eclipse's maintenance corridors, their helmet displays tracking a weak life sign ahead. Target located, Voss reported, spotting Korvac's prone form. Medical team, move up. The Vice Admiral lay unconscious near an access panel, his suit's oxygen reserves dropping into critical levels. The rescue team worked swiftly, connecting an emergency supply line while securing him for transport. On the Shadowblade's bridge, Lieutenant Kara Vex reviewed the latest atmospheric data. The synthesized proteins had restored optimal conditions throughout the vessel, transmitting modification protocols to the Sunweaver and Dawnstar. Their life support systems are approaching failure. The contained antimatter field interacted with Project Eclipse's weapon arrays, creating a shimmering distortion in Mars' orbit. Dr. Sullivan's sensors registered the phenomenon from Earth. These particle decay patterns, she noted, examining the readings. They match Elva's cellular restructuring process. Her lab computers analyzed the similarities between the orbital effect and the infant's adaptive capabilities. Colonel Tavik's ground teams reported unusual activity on the Martian surface. Crystalline structures detected below the platform's position. Growth patterns consistent with Earth's transformation zone. The formations pushed through Mars' rusty soil, their molecular structure identical to the processors spreading across Earth. Security Director Thavik coordinated with local authorities as similar crystals approached the outskirts of Chicago and Mumbai. Establish containment stations here and here, he instructed, marking positions on the tactical display. Priority on crowd control and environmental monitoring. The transformed zones created spectacular atmospheric effects. Ribbons of green and blue light danced at the boundaries, drawing crowds of onlookers. Agricultural drones recorded unprecedented growth in affected areas' corn stalks reaching twice their normal height, wheat displaying enhanced protein content. Admiral Sorvik's engineering teams integrated the modified life support systems across the Earth defense fleet. Atmospheric efficiency increased by 40%, implementing upgrades to secondary vessels. Inside the medical wing, Darren's monitors detected new changes in Elva's biology. Complex molecular structures formed within her cells, producing enzymes capable of rapid atmospheric conversion. The infant's skin glowed with traces of bioluminescence as her body generated increasingly sophisticated compounds. These new enzymes, Dr. Sullivan observed, analyzing the data. They're restructuring atmospheric elements at the molecular level. Her synthesis lab began producing samples of the enhanced compounds for testing. The crystalline formations on Mars expanded outward from their initial site, creating a web of interconnected processors beneath the surface. Colonel Tavik's sensors tracked their growth rate while monitoring the particle field above. Atmospheric density increasing in affected zones, his science officer reported, detecting trace amounts of oxygen production. High Counselor Marvik's transmission reached Earth's command center. The Benzite Council formally requests assistance in implementing adaptive atmospheric technology. Our environmental crisis requires immediate action. Project Eclipse's power systems entered shutdown as the containment field stabilized the antimatter core. Lieutenant Commander Voss's team evacuated with the unconscious Korvac, while engineering crews secured critical systems. The particle field continued its expansion in Mars' orbit, catalyzing changes in the thin atmosphere below. Dr. Sullivan's orbital platforms recorded the interaction between the field and the growing crystal network. Each new formation increased the efficiency of the transformation process, suggesting a path toward sustainable terraforming. Earth's upper atmosphere began to show signs of change where the adaptive zone reached the stratosphere. Complex aurora patterns formed as the transformed ecosystem extended its influence upward. Lieutenant Nex's monitoring stations tracked the expansion across 3 continents, documenting the steady replacement of pollutants with optimized atmospheric compounds. The Shadowblade's successful adaptation sparked a wave of requests from Benzite vessels. Lieutenant Kara Vex prioritized ships with critical systems, transmitting modification protocols while her crew monitored the results. Each successful conversion strengthened the alliance between the two species. Darren adjusted Elva's medical support systems as her production of conversion enzymes increased. The infant's enhanced biology pointed toward possibilities that exceeded their original atmospheric processing technology. Dr. Sullivan's analysis suggested these natural compounds could transform hostile environments without the massive infrastructure previously required. Colonel Tavik's sensors detected new crystalline growth spreading from the original formations on Mars. The network expanded beneath the surface, following patterns that mirrored Earth's transformation. Above, the particle field continued to interact with the thin atmosphere, accelerating the planet's environmental changes. The particle field surrounding Project Eclipse pulsed with new intensity, scattering iridescent particles through Mars' thin atmosphere. Dr. Sullivan's sensors captured an unexpected surge in atmospheric conversion rates directly below the containment zone. "These readings can't be right," she transmitted to Admiral Corvin. "The crystalline growth rate just increased by a factor of 50. Colonel Tavik's ground teams reported rapid expansion of the Martian formations. Crystal structures now cover 3 square kilometers and accelerating. They're following the same pattern as Earth's network, but at unprecedented speed." Dr. Sullivan's analysis revealed traces of leaked atmospheric conversion proteins in the scattered debris field around Project Eclipse. The contained antimatter field had amplified their adaptive properties, creating a cascading reaction across the Martian surface. The Shadowblade's atmospheric probes descended through Mars' thinning upper atmosphere. Lieutenant Kara Vex studied the incoming data, detecting molecular signatures matching Elva's conversion enzymes. The network is extracting CO2 from the polar caps. Admiral Corvin's engineering team documented the atmospheric changes, density increasing by 0.03% per hour in affected zones. Oxygen production confirmed. High Counselor Marvick's image appeared on the main display. "These developments exceed our projections. I propose establishing a joint research facility to study the transformation process." Security Director Thavik coordinated with Earth's municipal authorities as the Crystal Network reached the suburbs of Chicago. Medical drones monitored the first large-scale human exposure to the transformed environment. "Atmospheric analysis shows optimal conditions for both human and benzite physiology," reported Dr. Chen from the Chicago monitoring station. Residents report increased lung capacity and energy levels. The crystalline structures beneath Earth's surface triggered secondary changes in the groundwater composition. Dr. Sullivan's lab analyzed samples from affected aquifers. The modified water is creating self-replicating conversion nodes. Each new crystal functions as an independent processor. Vice Admiral Korvac regained consciousness in the benzite medical bay. "The military development files," he transmitted to Dr. Sullivan. "They contain control protocols for crystal growth patterns." Colonel Hayes activated Earth's deep space monitoring array as the Martian network expanded, detecting gravitational fluctuations. The processed atmosphere and crystal mass are affecting Mars' orbital characteristics. Admiral Sorvik's vessels moved into position around the affected region, establishing containment perimeter at coordinates once again marked for. All ships maintained sensor lock on gravitational distortions. In the medical wing, Elva's latest transformation phase stabilized. Darren adjusted her support systems while studying the new enzyme production data. These compounds appear designed for interplanetary adaptation. She's creating a bridge between the Earth and Mars networks. Lieutenant Commander Voss's science team documented the spreading crystalline formations from orbit. Growth rate maintains exponential increase. Surface coverage now exceeds 12 square kilometers. The Shadowblade's probes detected increasing atmospheric density around the crystal zones. Lieutenant Kara Vex transmitted the data to Earth. oxygen concentration reaching 4% in transformed regions. The network is accelerating natural terraforming processes. Dr. Sullivan accessed the military files from Korvac. These control protocols could let us direct the crystal growth. We need to establish guidance parameters before the network affects Mars' orbit further. The transformed zones on both planets pulsed with bioluminescent activity as new crystal structures emerged. Earth's network responded to the Martian changes, producing matching patterns across continents. The adaptive ecosystem expanded upward, creating visible atmospheric boundaries where processed air met untransformed regions. Colonel Tavic's sensors tracked the gravitational shifts. Mars' orbital period showing measurable changes, deviation currently at 0.003% and rising. Admiral Corvin coordinated with the Benzite fleet. Position vessels at these coordinates. We need full sensor coverage of the transformation zone. The crystalline processors continued their rapid expansion across the Martian surface, converting the planet's frozen carbon dioxide into breathable atmosphere. Above, the contained antimatter field sustained its catalyzing effect, driving the acceleration of adaptive processes that would reshape both worlds. Atmospheric processes that would reshape both planets. Deep space monitoring stations registered the first significant changes in Mars' physical characteristics. The planet's mass increased by 0.3% in 24 hours, concentrated within the crystal-affected regions. Orbital velocity shifting beyond predicted parameters, Colonel Hayes reported, studying the data streams from Earth's sensor network. Mass increase threatens solar system gravitational equilibrium. Admiral Corvin's fleet moved into position around Mars' equator. Engineering crews deployed modified benzite gravitational stabilizers, their crystalline arrays pulsing with contained energy fields. Stabilizer network online, transmitted Chief Engineer Wren, compensating for mass fluctuations in sectors 7 through 12. The devices created localized fields that counteracted the growing gravitational distortions. Automated systems adjusted continuously as crystal growth accelerated beneath the Martian surface. In the medical wing, ELVA's monitoring equipment recorded new enzyme patterns. Dr. Sullivan analyzed the molecular data, noting direct correlations with the Martian formations. These structures, she indicated, highlighting matching patterns on her display. The crystal matrices exactly mirror ELVA's latest adaptations. She's not just surviving the changes, she's directing them. The transformation zone reached Denver's city limits. Crystal structures emerged through storm drains and utility tunnels, spreading through the underground infrastructure. Environmental sensors tracked dramatic improvements in air quality as the network processed industrial pollutants. Atmospheric contamination down 90%, reported Dr. Chen from the Denver monitoring station. Crystal growth following municipal water systems. Security Director Thavick established the Joint Command Center in a converted office complex. Major Sarah Sullivan arrived to oversee human operations, her environmental systems expertise complementing the benzite monitoring equipment. Integration of Earth benzite sensor networks complete, she announced, activating the combined display system. Real-time tracking of crystal growth patterns now online. Vice Admiral Korvac's technical files provided crucial insights. Dr. Sullivan's research team identified specific electromagnetic frequencies that influenced crystal formation. They tested the control method in Denver, using modified atmospheric processors to direct the network's expansion. Pulse the M field at these coordinates, Dr. Sullivan instructed. The crystals responded, their growth patterns shifting to follow the guided frequencies. Lieutenant Kara Vex coordinated with engineering teams across the benzite fleet. The Shadowblade's atmospheric modifications proved universally effective. Ship after ship reported successful adaptation, their life support systems showing unprecedented efficiency gains. Implementing standardized upgrade protocols, she transmitted to Admiral Sorvik. Prioritizing vessels with critical atmospheric needs. On Mars, the crystal network tapped into subsurface ice deposits. The frozen water transformed into atmospheric vapor, creating visible cloud formations in the transformed regions. Colonel Tavik's sensors tracked the first Martian weather patterns in millions of years. High-altitude moisture detected, his science officer reported. Cloud systems forming above crystal zones. The gravitational stabilizers required constant adjustment as Mars' mass continued to increase. Engineering crews worked in shifts, monitoring the automated compensation systems while developing more sophisticated control protocols. Field strength at maximum in sectors 3 and 4, Chief Engineer Wren updated. Implementing additional stabilizers to maintain orbital parameters. Earth's crystal network spread through connected waterways, appearing in major cities worldwide. The Denver Command Center coordinated the controlled expansion, using the newly developed M frequencies to guide crystal growth. Major Sarah Sullivan studied the latest transformation data. Crystal formations detected in Sydney, Mumbai, and London, all following controlled growth patterns. The Shadowblade's atmospheric probes recorded increasing oxygen levels in Mars' transformed regions. Lieutenant Kara Vex transmitted the readings to Earth as new cloud formations appeared on the horizon. Martian surface. The readings triggered urgent alerts across her monitoring system. Atmospheric sensors detecting pressure surge in sectors 7 through 9. Deep radar showing massive subsurface movement. The ground beneath Colonel Tavik's survey team trembled. Crystalline spires erupted through the rusty soil as hidden ice deposits fractured and vaporized. Multiple seismic events registering across the northern hemisphere. Crystal network tapping into subsurface aquifers. The transformed zone expanded rapidly, crystalline processors converting the released water vapor into atmospheric components. Surface coverage reached 15% of the planet within hours. In the affected regions, pressure sensors registered the first sustainable breathable atmosphere on Mars in millions of years. Dr. Sullivan's research facility in Denver recorded an unexpected phenomenon. The Earth-based crystal matrices pulsed with a blue-white light that matched the rhythm of their Martian counterparts. These formations are synchronizing across planetary distances, she transmitted to the Joint Command Center. The resonance is creating gravitational microdistortions. The synchronized pulses amplified the atmospheric conversion process. Lieutenant Commander Voss's orbital scans documented the efficiency increase. Conversion rates up 400%. The networks are feeding off each other's energy signatures. Admiral Corven's engineering crews deployed additional gravitational stabilizers around Mars' equator. Chief Engineer Wren coordinated the installation of experimental counter-rotating platforms, activating orbital array alpha through gamma, generating opposing gravitational fields to offset mass increase. The stabilizer platforms moved into precise orbital positions, their energy fields creating a web of gravitational compensation around Mars. Engineers monitored the automated systems as they adjusted to each new crystalline-induced mass fluctuation. In the Denver Command Center, Security Director Tavik's atmospheric sensors detected changes in Earth's upper atmosphere. Major Sarah Sullivan analyzed the incoming data. The transformation is affecting our ozone layer. These readings indicate increased ultraviolet protection and integration of benzite-compatible elements. The Shadowblade led a formation of modified benzite vessels through Earth's atmosphere. Lieutenant Kara Vex transmitted approach vectors to ground control, establishing primary corridors for transformed atmospheric zones, all ships showing green on hybrid life support systems. 17 benzite ships followed her designated flight path, their newly upgraded atmospheric processors adapting seamlessly to Earth's modified environment. Traffic control coordinates flowed between Earth and alien vessels, creating standardized protocols for future operations. Darren monitored Elva's latest enzyme production cycle. The infant's modified biology generated increasingly sophisticated atmospheric conversion compounds. Dr. Sullivan's analysis revealed embedded molecular programming sequences. These new enzymes contain adaptive algorithms, she explained to Admiral Corvin. They identify atmospheric components and selectively transform harmful elements while preserving beneficial ones. The process optimizes air quality for both species simultaneously. Vice Admiral Korvac transmitted additional technical specifications from his secure medical bay. Colonel Hayes integrated the data into Earth's orbital defense grid, modifying satellite systems to counter atmospheric weapons. Defense network reconfigured, implementing protective protocols across all platforms. The crystal formations evolved, developing structures that captured and stored solar radiation. Energy readings spiked as the networks converted sunlight into power that accelerated their expansion. Protective fields stabilized around transformed regions, their strength growing with each stored energy cycle. Colonel Tavik's Mars team documented the formation of the planet's first permanent clouds. Water vapor collected in the northern hemisphere, creating weather systems that distributed moisture across the transformed zone. Detecting liquid water accumulation in lowland areas, surface temperature and pressure maintaining stability. Security Director Thavik coordinated evacuation procedures as Earth's adaptation zone approached new population centers. Modified sensors tracked crystal growth through urban infrastructure, while environmental teams prepared residents for temporary relocation. Mumbai Transformation Zone expanding through Sector 4, Major Sarah Sullivan reported. London and Sydney showing similar progression patterns, all crystal growth following established control frequencies. The Shadowblade's atmospheric probes descended through Mars' evolving weather systems. Lieutenant Kara Vex studied the readings from the first Martian rainstorm in millennia. Water droplets fell through the processed air, carrying trace elements that accelerated surface transformation. Lieutenant Kara Vex's atmospheric probes transmitted a cascade of urgent data as the first raindrops struck Mars' transformed surface. Water droplets splashed against crystalline formations, creating rivulets that carved channels through the rusty soil. The precipitation carried transformation enzymes deeper into the terrain, accelerating the conversion process. Detecting water accumulation in sectors 12 through 15, she reported, adjusting the probe array. Formation of preliminary watersheds in progress. Colonel Tavik's ground team documented the historic rainfall from their survey position, multiple drainage patterns emerging. Crystal networks directing water flow through optimal distribution paths. Dr. Sullivan's monitoring equipment registered an unexpected ping. Microscopic analysis of water samples revealed cellular structures, primitive bacteria thriving in the newly formed pools. "We have indigenous life," she transmitted to the command center. "First confirmed biological activity in the transformed zones." The transformation's reach extended across Earth's agricultural heartland. In Kansas, crystal formations emerged through cornfields, their structures interweaving with crop rows. Stalks doubled in height overnight, developing enhanced nutrient processing capabilities. Dr. Thomas Reed activated the Department of Agriculture's emergency protocols. His teams deployed specialized sensors throughout the affected farmland. Soil composition changing at molecular level, measuring 400% increase in mineral bioavailability. The Shadowblade's orbital scans detected electromagnetic anomalies above Mars' northern hemisphere. Lieutenant Commander Voss analyzed the readings. Magnetic field forming in transformed regions. similar properties to Earth's magnetosphere. Admiral Corvin reviewed the sensor data. The shield effects protecting the new atmosphere. Implement gravitational harvest protocols. Engineering crews modified their stabilizer network, installing crystal-powered collection arrays. Chief Engineer Wren coordinated the energy transfer systems, converting excess transformation energy to gravitic counterfields. Mass compensation at 60% efficiency. In the Denver Research Facility, Dr. Sullivan studied ELVA's latest enzyme production. The compound's accelerated mineral breakdown in test samples, reconstructing iron oxide into complex biological substrates. The catalytic effects transforming Mars' surface composition, creating foundation for sustainable ecosystems. Security Director Thavik initiated urban transformation protocols in Denver's central districts. Crystal networks integrated with power grids and water treatment facilities, improving system efficiency by orders of magnitude. Major Sarah Sullivan monitored the controlled expansion through municipal infrastructure. Sector 3 transformation complete, she reported. Power consumption down 80%, water quality exceeding all federal standards. Colonel Hayes dispatched the Shadow Mirror recovery team. Captain Sarah Foster's Joint Earth Benzite Force departed for the asteroid belt installation. Target coordinates confirmed. Initiating stealth approach vector. Environmental sensors registered dramatic shifts across both planets. Mars' atmospheric pressure reached 10% Earth equivalent in transformed zones. Agricultural monitoring stations documented unprecedented crop yields throughout the American Midwest. Crystal formations appeared on Phobos' cratered surface, visible through orbital telescopes. In the medical wing, ELVA's monitoring equipment detected new biological changes. The infant's enzyme production shifted, developing more sophisticated atmospheric conversion compounds. Dr. Sullivan analyzed the molecular patterns, noting increased complexity in the programming sequences. Her adaptations are evolving, she transmitted to Admiral Corvin. The transformation's entering a new phase. Lieutenant Kara Vex guided the Shadow Blade through Mars' emerging weather patterns. Rain streaked across the viewports as clouds gathered above the crystal fields. Below, rivulets merged into streams, carrying life-giving water across the transforming surface of humanity's second home. The crystalline structures on Phobos gleamed against the darkness of space, their blue-white light pulsing in synchronization with the network spreading across Mars' surface. Dr. Sullivan's monitoring equipment tracked the resonance patterns between the three celestial bodies. The Phobos formations are accelerating exponentially, she transmitted to the Joint Command Center. Mass readings indicate complete transformation of surface layers within 48 hours. Admiral Corvin's engineering fleet moved into position around the Martian moon. Deploying modified stabilizer array, Chief Engineer Wren announced. Initiating gravitational compensation field. The new stabilizers activated, generating precisely calibrated energy fields that enveloped Phobos. Crystal growth continued under the protective barrier as engineering crews collected data on low-gravity transformation mechanics. In the asteroid belt, Captain Sarah Foster's team secured the Shadow Mirror facility. Lieutenant Zhang accessed the central computer core, inputting Vice Admiral Korvac's authentication codes. Military lockouts disengaged, Zhang reported. Accessing atmospheric replication systems. Technical crews modified the facility's crystal-based technology, redirecting its original weapons programming toward environmental transformation. Production lines activated, manufacturing enhanced versions of ELVA's conversion enzymes. The Midwest's crystal network expanded through irrigation channels, transforming water chemistry at the molecular level. Dr. Reed's sensors recorded unprecedented changes in crop biology. Wheat fields showing hybrid characteristics, he transmitted from his mobile lab in Kansas. New grain varieties incorporating benzoate nutritional profiles. Protein content increased by 300%. The modified crops towered above their original height, developing crystalline structures within their cellular matrices. Soil samples revealed increasing mineral density as the transformation spread through root systems. Security Director Thavik coordinated with orbital control as crystal formations affected satellite operations. Modified atmospheric layers extended into low Earth orbit, requiring immediate trajectory adjustments. Implementing new orbital parameters, Major Sarah Sullivan confirmed. Signal strength improving in transformed zones. Communication efficiency up 200%. The Denver facility's instruments detected a surge in ELVA's biological readings. Dr. Sullivan examined the medical scans, identifying complex organ structures forming within the infant's abdomen. These new organs are producing advanced enzyme combinations, she reported to Admiral Corvin. The compounds show precise atmospheric control capabilities. Captain Foster activated the Shadow Mirror's production sequence. Automated pods launched from the facility, carrying industrial quantities of conversion enzymes toward both planets. First delivery wave incoming. Lieutenant Commander Voss transmitted from Mars orbit, targeting Northern Hemisphere distribution points. The Shadow Blade sensors tracked the formation of Mars' first lakes as water accumulated in transformed lowlands. Lieutenant Kara Vex adjusted her scanning array, documenting the expanding hydrological systems. Detecting sustained evaporation cycles, she reported. Weather patterns stabilizing across sectors 12 through 20. Crystal regulators emerge throughout Earth's transformed regions, their structures automatically adjusting atmospheric composition. Dr. Sullivan analyzed their operation as they maintained optimal conditions for both species. The networks are developing autonomous environmental control, she transmitted. No mechanical intervention required for atmospheric maintenance. Security Director Thavik expanded the command center's monitoring capabilities, integrating orbital management systems. Crystal-enhanced communications flowed between ground stations and satellites, creating an improved global network. The transformed zones continued spreading across both worlds. Mars' new lakes reflected sunlight through thin clouds, while Earth's hybrid crops flourished under the modified atmosphere. Elva's enhanced biology pulsed in rhythm with the planetary changes, her new organs producing increasingly sophisticated transformation compounds. Deep space monitoring stations lit up with urgent alerts. Dr. Sullivan shifted her attention from Elva's readings to the incoming data stream. Gravitational sensors detected subtle perturbations rippling through the asteroid belt. Admiral Corvin, she transmitted. The Mars-Phobos transformation is affecting local space, orbital mechanics showing increasing instability. The engineering fleet stabilizer arrays registered mounting gravitational stress. Chief Engineer Wren adjusted power distribution across the network. Compensator load increasing. Shadow Mirror facility at risk. Captain Foster's team accelerated their modifications to the atmospheric replication systems. Zhang, redirect power to structural integrity fields, she ordered. We need these production lines operational before the orbit destabilizes. The facility's manufacturing centers hummed to life. Automated assembly units constructed enzyme pods while modified benzoate transporters prepared for systematic distribution. Foster checked the production readouts 50,000 metric tons per day, each pod capable of transforming 100 square kilometers of planetary surface. On Earth, crystal formations breached new territory in Washington state. Dr. Reed's ground teams tracked their progress toward Mount Rainier's dormant volcanic system. Sensor arrays detected increasing thermal activity as crystalline structures tapped into geothermal power sources. The networks are adapting to available energy, Dr. Sullivan noted, analyzing the thermal signatures. They're converting volcanic heat directly into transformation power. Security Director Thavic's orbital monitoring detected anomalous readings from Earth's moon. Crystal formation confirmed on lunar surface, Major Sullivan reported. Growth rate accelerated by low-gravity environment. Thavic dispatched stabilizer units toward lunar orbit, implementing Phobos protocols, maintain tight formation around primary growth zones. The Shadow Blade descended through Mars' thickening atmosphere. Lieutenant Kara Vex checked environmental readings, 15% Earth normal pressure in transformed regions. Admiral Sorvik's authorization came through. Proceed with surface expedition. Minimal protection protocols approved. The first joint Earth Benzite ground team prepared for deployment. Environmental specialists calibrated new sensor arrays designed for the evolving Martian ecosystem. Modified pressure suits stood ready in the airlock. Dr. Sullivan divided her attention between multiple data streams. Elva's new organ structures produced increasingly sophisticated enzyme combinations. The infant's biological modifications had developed into an integrated atmospheric control system. Her cellular structure mirrors benzite atmospheric processors, Sullivan transmitted to Admiral Corvin, but the efficiency rates exceed anything in our database. At Shadow Mirror, Lieutenant Zhang accessed classified research files. Captain Foster found something in the databanks. Experimental gravitic technology designed for artificial atmosphere containment. Foster reviewed the technical specifications. This could counteract the transformation's gravitational effects. Get this data to engineering immediately. The facility's production lines launched another wave of pods. Crystalline networks spread across Earth, Mars, and their companions, transforming 3 celestial bodies simultaneously. Each converted region displayed increasing environmental optimization, creating spaces where both species could thrive. Dr. Reed's agricultural sensors documented the underground expansion through modified root systems. Crops developed crystalline structures within their cellular matrices, spreading transformation enzymes through soil layers. The process created a secondary vector, complementing atmospheric distribution. Subterranean conversion rate matches surface progression, he reported from his mobile lab. The plants are becoming active participants in planetary adaptation. The Shadow Mirror facility adjusted its orbit as gravitational fluctuations intensified. Captain Foster implemented the newly discovered stabilization protocols, while engineering crews modified crystal arrays to incorporate the experimental technology. Admiral Corvin's fleet maintained position around Mars, monitoring the cascading changes across the solar system. The transformation had evolved beyond its original parameters, creating new patterns of interaction between celestial bodies. Each crystal network pulsed with accumulated energy, converting available resources into tools for planetary change. Prepare for touchdown, Lieutenant Kara Vex announced as the Shadow Blade descended through Mars' thickening atmosphere. The ship's sensors registered stable atmospheric pressure at 18% Earth normal in the designated landing zone. Colonel Marcus Hayes adjusted his lightweight pressure suit, while Science Officer Velara calibrated her atmospheric sampling equipment. The joint Earth Benzite team occupied the shuttle's main cabin, their gear secured for landing procedures. New Horizon base location confirmed, Vex transmitted. Northern Basin area showing optimal stability readings. The Shadow Blade settled onto Martian soil near a sprawling water basin. Hayes led the first surface team down the deployment ramp, their boots leaving clear impressions in the transformed regolith. Velara's sensors immediately began collecting data on the emerging ecosystem. Atmospheric composition holding steady, she reported, examining her readings. Crystal networks maintaining consistent oxygen production. At Shadow Mirror, Captain Foster oversaw the integration of modified gravitic systems. Engineering confirms successful anchor point generation, Lieutenant Zhang announced from his station. Stability corridor network active across inter-system coordinates. The facility's new gravitational matrix extended invisible lines of force between Earth, Mars, and their moons. Foster watched as orbital tracking displays showed reduced perturbation levels across all monitored bodies. Structural integrity fields holding at maximum efficiency, Zhang added. Production systems operating at full capacity. On Earth's moon, crystalline formations expanded across the Sea of Tranquility. Major Sullivan stabilizer units maintained precise orbital corrections as the transformation generated traces of lunar atmosphere. Crystal coverage at 15%, she transmitted to Security Director Thavik, detecting nitrogen accumulation in transformed sectors. Dr. Reed's modified crops flourished beneath Brazil's morning sun. His mobile laboratory tracked nutrient flows through crystalline root systems that stretched across former wasteland. Sample Site 7 showing six-fold yield increase, he documented. Soil mineralization continues to exceed projections. The Shadowblade's new orbital station took shape above Mars as construction pods assembled prefabricated sections. Lieutenant Vex coordinated incoming shipments of atmospheric processing equipment designed for joint species operation. Station framework complete, she reported. Beginning installation of environmental systems. At New Horizon Base, Colonel Hayes examined preliminary soil samples under xenobiological containment protocols. The microscope's display revealed something unexpected movement. Dr. Sullivan, he transmitted to Earth, were detecting mobile microorganisms in transformed soil layers. Forwarding data stream now. Sullivan divided her attention between the incoming Mars samples and Elva's latest medical scans. The infant's new glands produced precisely targeted enzyme combinations that matched the transformation signatures appearing in Hayes specimens. These microbes show hybrid characteristics, she noted. Similar protein structures to Elva's modified cells. The Phobos stabilization array hummed with energy as crystal formations covered the small moon's surface. Chief Engineer Wren monitored power levels across Admiral Corvin's fleet. Gravitational projection system performing within parameters, he reported. Moon's orbit maintaining stability. Deep in Earth's Pacific Ocean, crystal networks extended through thermal vent systems. Thavik's monitoring stations tracked the transformation spread through marine environments. Temperature and current sensors detected the first signs of modified weather patterns forming above the transformed zones. Back on Mars, Science Officer Velara analyzed atmospheric data from New Horizons weather station. Detecting regular precipitation cycles, she transmitted. Crystal field resonance creating consistent circulation patterns. Hayes watched through the base's observation dome as clouds gathered above the water basin. The transforming surface of Mars spread out before him, crystal formations gleaming beneath the thin atmosphere as a new world took shape. Engineering crews at Shadow Mirror continued modifying gravitational anchor points, compensating for each phase of planetary change. Captain Foster reviewed system status reports as the facility maintained its critical role in stabilizing the solar system's evolving geometry. Dr. Sullivan's instruments recorded another surge in Elva's biological readings. The infant's specialized glands activated, releasing a new generation of transformation compounds into carefully shielded containment vessels for analysis. Inside the containment vessels, the new compounds swirled with iridescent patterns, ready for deployment to the transformed zones. Colonel Hayes' voice cut through the data stream. Dr. Sullivan, you need to see this. The microscope feed from New Horizon Base displayed cellular structures unlike anything previously documented. Microorganisms moved with purpose through the Martian soil samples, their membranes incorporating both crystalline fragments and organic components. These specimens show unprecedented hybridization, Dr. Sullivan transmitted, pulling up comparison scans of Elva's latest tissue samples. The protein structures match her modified biology, but they've incorporated elements from Mars' mineral matrix. The discovery triggered immediate expansion of research operations. Within hours, additional Earth benzite science teams deployed across the northern basin. Mobile labs tracked spreading colonies of hybrid microbes through the transformed soil layers. At Shadow Mirror, Captain Foster monitored the facility's gravitic anchor network as it achieved full operational status. Holographic displays showed stable corridors forming between the transforming world's geometric lines of force, maintaining precise orbital relationships. Automated compensation systems online, Lieutenant Zhang reported. Gravitational field strength adjusting to crystal mass distribution. The facility's atmospheric processors hummed at peak capacity. Foster watched production metrics climb across all fabrication units. 1,000 square kilometers per day, she noted. Maximum sustainable output achieved. Deep beneath Earth's Pacific waters, Thavic's monitoring stations tracked new developments in the marine transformation. Crystal formations wrapped around hydrothermal vents, their structures incorporating mineral-rich fluids into specialized processing nodes. Detecting stable gas retention at 2,000 meters, reported the oceanographic team. Crystalline matrices creating pressure-resistant atmospheric pockets. Admiral Corvin's engineering fleet expanded their stabilizer network to encompass Earth's moon. The lunar surface flickered with growing crystal formations as noble gases accumulated in the emerging atmosphere. Magnetospheric containment holding, Chief Engineer Wren transmitted. Crystal growth rates within calculated parameters. At the Denver facility, Dr. Sullivan analyzed Elva's latest enzyme production patterns. The infant's specialized glands pulsed in rhythm with Mars' developing weather systems. Each release of compounds corresponded precisely with atmospheric pressure changes across the transformed zones. Her biology has developed planetary-scale synchronization, Sullivan documented. These enzyme complexes show unprecedented environmental integration. New Horizon Base expanded rapidly across Mars' northern hemisphere. Colonel Hayes supervised deployment of atmospheric amplifier arrays while modified ground vehicles established transportation networks through the transformed regions. Science Officer Velara coordinated mobile research teams tracking the spread of hybrid life forms. Biological activity detected in Sector 7, she reported. New bacterial colonies adapting to local mineral compositions. Above Mars, the Shadowblade's orbital station recorded the planet's first major storm system. Lieutenant Vex tracked massive cloud formations swirling above the northern basin. Atmospheric density reaching 22% Earth normal in precipitation zones, she transmitted. The station's sensors detected increasing interaction between crystal structures and water features. Natural cycles emerged as transformed gases circulated through the thickening atmosphere. Each storm redistributed essential compounds across the growing habitable zones. Dr. Sullivan's instruments recorded another surge in enzyme production from Elva's modified glands. The new compounds displayed unique properties, molecular structures, capable of maintaining consistent atmospheric conditions between transformed regions of different planets. These enzymes could potentially bridge Earth and Mars atmospheres, she transmitted to Admiral Corvin. Once transformation thresholds align, stable transfer may be possible. Shadow Mirror's long-range sensors detected the first crystal formations appearing on main belt asteroids. Captain Foster adjusted the facility's gravitational projection arrays to accommodate the expanding transformation zone. The automated systems compensated for each new growth point, maintaining stability across the evolving network of celestial bodies. Through New Horizons Observation Dome, Colonel Hayes watched clouds gather above the transformed basin. Lightning flickered between crystal formations as another storm system took shape, carrying the seeds of change across Mars' ancient surface. His sensor package detected increasing concentrations of hybrid microbes in the soil beneath his feet, their activity accelerating with each pulse of Elva's synchronized enzyme release. A surge of enzyme production from Elva's specialized glands cascaded across Dr. Sullivan's monitoring displays. The molecular patterns shifted, revealing atmospheric compatibility markers never before observed. Sullivan transmitted rapid commands to her research team, initiating construction of a high-altitude research platform. Skybridge Alpha Online, the facility's AI announced as the final stabilizers locked into position. Suspended 50 kilometers above Earth's surface, the platform's sensors tracked crystalline tendrils stretching into the stratosphere. Dr. Sullivan adjusted her instruments, focusing on a particularly dense cluster of transformed air. Recording sustained atmospheric corridor formation, she documented. The specialized enzymes created distinct pathways of modified gases that maintained their integrity against the surrounding air masses. At New Horizon Base, Colonel Hayes activated external cameras as the first major Martian storm system approached. Lightning arced between crystal formations, illuminating clouds heavy with precipitation. The rain began as scattered droplets before intensifying into steady sheets that darkened the transformed soil. Microbial activity increasing exponentially, Science Officer Velara reported from her monitoring station. Her screens displayed rapid cellular multiplication as hybrid organisms responded to the moisture. New structures emerged within the microbes' crystalline appendages that enhanced atmospheric processing. Captain Foster's holographic displays at Shadow Mirror highlighted a spreading network of crystal growth throughout the asteroid belt. Analysis confirms preferential formation on nickel-iron bodies, Lieutenant Zhang reported. The facility's fabrication units hummed as they produced specialized enzyme variants designed for asteroidal conditions. Lieutenant Kara Vex coordinated final adjustments for the Mars-Phobos atmospheric bridge test. Crystalline resonance synchronized, she transmitted to the engineering fleet. Initiating corridor generation. A visible band of transformed atmosphere stretched between the red planet and its moon, maintained by pooling crystal formations at both endpoints. Vex authorized the first unpressurized cargo transfer, watching as supply containers moved freely through the stabilized corridor. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, crystal networks interfaced with volcanic vents in expanding patterns. Research vessels tracked the emergence of hybrid coral structures that incorporated crystalline growth patterns. The formations created natural thermal energy collectors, powering accelerated atmospheric processing that generated breathable pockets at extreme depths. Pressure stable at 2,100 meters, the oceanographic team reported to Security Director Thavik, detecting organized gas retention in transformed zones. On the Moon, crystal coverage reached a critical threshold. Thavik's orbital management teams tracked the formation of the first lunar winds as accumulated gases began to circulate. Modified sensors detected atmospheric pressure building above the transformed surface. Dr. Sullivan's medical monitors recorded unprecedented activity in Elva's specialized organs. The infant's biological systems had evolved into a complete atmospheric regulation network, capable of molecular-level gas manipulation. Each organ cluster functioned as a living template for the expanding crystalline formations. Northern sector reaching 25% Earth normal, Colonel Hayes announced from Mars. The transformed atmosphere allowed brief periods of unsuited surface operations. Construction crews used locally grown crystal to build the first permanent habitation domes across the basin. Shadow Mirror's long-range sensors detected atmospheric bridges forming between main belt asteroids. Captain Foster adjusted the facility's gravitational anchors to accommodate the expanding network of habitable corridors. The transformation spread through space, creating new pathways between worlds as humanity prepared to claim its place among the stars. Elva's monitors pulsed in harmony with the distant crystal formations. Her specialized glands released another wave of transformation compounds, their molecular structures perfectly adapted to maintain the growing bridges between worlds. Through the observation windows of New Horizon Base, Hayes watched crystal networks glitter beneath the Martian rain, their structures reaching ever upward into the changing sky. Initializing final atmospheric corridor, Lieutenant Zhang transmitted as crystal networks glittered beneath the Martian rain. The transformed region spread steadily over the following months, each new formation adding stability to the emerging system. 6 months later, New Horizon Base bustled with unprecedented activity. The central dome's crystalline walls pulsed with soft blue-green light as Dr. Maria Sullivan arranged decorations for an event she once thought impossible, her daughter's 5th birthday celebration on Mars. Environmental parameters optimal, the base AI announced as guests arrived through the atmospheric bridge from Earth. Security Director Thavik stepped through first, followed by Admiral Corvan. The bridge required no airlocks or pressure suits, just a simple archway of pools crystal formations, maintaining a perfect atmospheric envelope between worlds. Captain Foster transmitted control protocols to Shadow Mirror's automated systems before departing her post. Facility stability confirmed, she noted, watching the holographic displays maintain steady readings without human oversight. The transformation had achieved true self-regulation. The Shadow Blade settled into orbit above New Horizon Base as Admiral Sorvik and Lieutenant Vex prepared to descend. Their shuttle passed through layers of Martian atmosphere, now indistinguishable from Earth's. Inside the dome, Darren Sullivan monitored Elva's biological readings with practiced ease. The displays showed unprecedented stability across all systems. "Look at these enzyme production patterns," he said to Maria. "They're reaching their final mature state." Elva sat in the center of the gathering, her skin emitting a gentle bioluminescence that synchronized perfectly with the crystal walls. As guests arrived, her specialized organs pulsed in harmony with the atmospheric bridges linking the worlds. A murmur spread through the crowd as Vice Admiral Korvac entered. His presence, once controversial, had become essential to understanding the transformation's full potential. He approached Elva carrying a small crystalline box. "By Benzite tradition," Korvac said, opening the box to reveal an iridescent medallion, "this marks acceptance into both our peoples." The medallion, crafted from transformed crystals of both worlds, caught the light with shifting patterns matching Elva's own bioluminescence. Dr. Sullivan's instruments recorded the final phase of Elva's biological maturation as the medallion was placed around her neck. Her enzyme production stabilized into perfect rhythm with the solar system's new atmospheric networks. Screens displayed cellular structures achieving their intended final state. Bridge network achieving full synchronization, Lieutenant Vex reported as the crystalline formations across Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt aligned their activities. Pressure readings stabilized at optimal levels for both human and benzite biology. Elva approached a crystal control panel extending from the dome wall, her parents at her sides. She placed her small hand on its surface, initiating the final connection between worlds. The panel pulsed in response, and through the dome's transparent sections, they watched the atmospheric bridge between Earth and Mars snap into permanent alignment. The gathered crew witnessed the first unpressurized transport vessel pass directly between planets, requiring no life support systems. Inside its open cabin, passengers sat comfortably as if on a terrestrial flight. "A new home awaits," Maria told Elva, showing her images of their crystalline dwelling, a structure anchored simultaneously in the atmospheres of both worlds. The design incorporated transformed elements from Earth and Mars, creating living spaces that existed in perfect harmony with the changed environment. Outside the dome, ships moved freely through the atmospheric corridors as crystal formations continued their subtle dance of environmental regulation. Elva's birthday celebration marked more than a personal milestone. It heralded humanity's first steps into true solar system civilization. The transformed regions pulsed with steady bioluminescence as night fell on Mars, the crystalline networks maintaining their perfect balance. Through the dome's transparent panels, Earth hung in the sky, no longer a distant goal, but now just a short walk through a bridge of breathable air.